Just one moment to make sure the live stream is running. Live stream is running, but it's in gallery mode. If we could please switch that to speaker mode. Thank you. All right, we're good now. At this time, will all sergeants please start recordings?
Computer recording started.
Thank you. And recording to cloud is underway. And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Committee on Aging, jointly with Senior Centers and Food Insecurity, jointly with COVID Recovery and Resiliency. At this time, would all panelists please turn on their videos for verification purposes? And to minimize any disruptions upon speaking, please place all electronic devices to vibrate or silent mode. If you'd like to submit testimony, please send via email to testimony@council.nyc.gov. Again, that is testimony@council.nyc.gov. Thank you so much for your cooperation. Chairs, we are ready to begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Crystal Hudson, and I'm the chair of the Committee on Aging. I would like to thank my co-chairs, Council Member Darlene Mealy and Council Member Francisco Moya, as well as the committee members from the Aging Committee, the Subcommittee on Senior Centers and Food Insecurity, and the Subcommittee on COVID Recovery and Resiliency for coming together to hold this afternoon's hearing. Today, the committees will conduct a hearing on protecting older adults at older adult centers during the continued COVID-19 pandemic and the reopening of these centers. Older adult centers, or OACs, are designed to be spaces where older adults can learn, enhance their health and well-being, and find community. I'm especially proud to have an accessible, inclusive, and welcoming gathering place like the Sage Center at Stonewall House in my district. Since opening, Sage Center has been a welcoming space for LGBTQ+ seniors in my district, providing them with virtual and in-person programming and state-of-the-art facilities. OACs like Sage play a vital role in community-based services, which are especially relevant for low-income, vulnerable, and socially isolated older adults. As a key component of the continuum of long-term care, we must ensure that OACs are supported and have the resources they need to care for our older community members. Last year, the city announced that it would invest $58 million in a 5-year community care plan for older New Yorkers, including adding additional OACs and NORCs, or naturally occurring retirement communities. DFTA released a request for proposals to create at least 25 new OACs or NORCs with a focus on 18 community districts with a high projected need for more centers and 11 with a medium projected need. Many of these communities were disproportionately impacted by COVID-19 and are also impacted by other health and socioeconomic disparities. Since then, DFTA has added 31 new sites to its network, exceeding the commitment to add 25, including 178 locations within those hardest hit neighborhoods. There are now 308 total sites, 222 standalone OACs, 50 network OACs, and 36 NORCs. The new request for proposals included $241 million for 3-year OAC and NORC contracts. I want to express my appreciation that the administration baselined 13 discretionary funded centers and exceeded its pledged commitment to add 25 new sites. This is great news for our communities and for our aging populations, and I hope we can continue to grow these essential resources. Earlier this year, DFTA reissued the RFP after finding that Crown Heights in Brooklyn, West Harlem and Morningside Heights in Manhattan, and Corona, Jamaica, and Springfield Gardens, Laurelton in Queens were underserved. The goal of the RFP is to have at least one contract in each of these 5 neighborhoods for a starting contract date of July 1st of this year. I look forward to discussing the administration's progress and addressing the needs of older adults in these underserved communities during this hearing. Thank you to the advocates and members of the public who are joining us today. Thank you to representatives from the administration for joining us. And I look forward to hearing from you on how we can continue to make OACs safe and welcoming spaces for all older New Yorkers, especially during this pandemic we are still experiencing. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues who are here today, Council members Ayala, Marte, Brewer, Lee, Narcisse, and Dinowitz. And I'd also like to thank my staff, Casey Addison and Andrew Wright, and Aging Committee staff, Crystal Pond, Chris Pepe, and Daniel Krupp. I will now turn it over to my co-chair, Councilmember Mealy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this joint hearing on older adult centers, or you can say the new name, OACs. I am Darlene Mealy, Chair of the Subcommittee on Senior Centers and Food Insecurity. I want to thank Chair of the Department of Aging for being here, Chair of the Aging Committee, Councilmember Crystal Hudson, and the Chair of Subcommittee on COVID Recovery and Resiliency, Councilmember Francisco Moya, for joining us today to discuss this important topic. OACs play a vital role in our lives of many older adults in the city by providing opportunities for recreation, socialization, volunteerism, and advocacy, as well as access to benefits and services. One of the main services that OACs provide is congregate meals. During the pandemic, this basic service was stopped entirely. And then as the centers reopened, capacity was only limited to 25%. Nothing compares to the social interaction and mental stimulation of shared meals, in-person activities. I must say, I just went to U. Gilroy Senior Center this week and celebrated Miss Carol Jarrett's 100th birthday. Imagine, they are still dancing, they're coming back. So we have to make sure the city come back with them. That is why I call for example to expand the capacity at the senior centers last month. And I am happy to report that DFTA lifted capacity restrictions at the OACs 2 weeks ago. Now we have to figure out how to bring our older adults back to the centers so they can become the busy hubs they once were. While OACs were at a quarter capacity in FY22, they had a daily average of little over 6,000 participants for conjugate meals. Last month, the average daily participation rate of the OACs for all activities was 15,500. A far cry from 3,000 older adult centers served daily before the pandemic was in. I understand that many do not feel safe or comfortable returning to the centers while the pandemic continues. And for those, I hope that grab and go meals continue to be an option. However, DFTA needs to conduct outreach to older adults to ally their fears, ensure them that their safety is our top priority, and let them know that older adult centers are an awesome place to be. DFTA needs to not just bring previous members back, but also recruit new participants. We have more individuals entering the older adult world. True. Every day, and senior centers are there as a place to hang out with friends, participate in activities, have a meal there, and as a place to hang out with friends. Conduct real services they need. I will not be satisfied until all our 272 DFTA older adult centers are at 100% capacity. Yet again, not just on paper, but in practice. I want to thank the administration, the advocates, the members of the public who have joined us today in discussing older adult centers. I would also like to thank subcommittee staff, Crystal Pond, Chris Pepe, and Dan Krupp. And I now would return this over to Chair Moya, Francisco Moya. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Mealy. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Councilmember Francisco Moya. I'm the chair of the Subcommittee on COVID Recovery and Resiliency. I'd like to start off by thanking both my co-chairs, Council members Hudson and Mealy for this important discussion. And I'd like to thank my colleagues also for being present here today. Today we will be discussing how we can protect older adults at older adult centers during the continued COVID-19 pandemic, as well as reopening older adult centers. As we know, COVID-19 has disproportionately impacted our older adult population. Specifically, the rate of COVID-19 hospitalizations and deaths are drastically higher for those over the age of 75 compared to all other age groups. And those ages 65 to 74 are also at an increased risk. Recent data shows that those aged 75 and older are 4 times more likely to be hospitalized with COVID than the city average. And those that from the ages of 65 and 74 are more than 2 times more likely to be hospitalized. This data, while not surprising, is also very disturbing. And not only have older adults been more disproportionately affected by the virus, but they have also been disproportionately affected by the food insecurity and social isolation and the disruption of their daily lives that has been exacerbated by the extended closure of in-person resources that they rely on, such as the older adult centers, libraries, and settlement houses, as well as the restricted reopening of restaurants and houses of worship. At the height of the pandemic, communicating basic information about the virus to older adults in New York City was difficult, especially for those who had limited English proficiency and were cut off from their families due to social distancing guidelines. The digital divide made accessing information even more difficult. While the world turned to Zoom, WebEx, and other online platforms to continue to communicate, the digital divide had increased social isolation for older New Yorkers, as 50% of older New Yorkers live alone and 42% do not have broadband internet access. Food insecurity was also exacerbated during the pandemic, as older adult centers, which older adults typically would rely on for meals, physically closed. And according to a 2020 study done by the Food Bank NYC, prior to the pandemic, 1 in 10 older New Yorkers was food insecure, and that number soared to 1 in 5 during the pandemic. Those of us living in and representing the communities hardest hit saw that right away. And that's why I helped fund and led efforts to get hot meals, food boxes, and other necessities to seniors in my district. We partnered up with local restaurants, Elmcor, Met Council, City Meals, East Elmhurst Civic Association, houses of worship such as First Baptist Church to go door to door, and not only to get seniors much needed food, but also to check in to see if there was anything else that they needed, including vaccinations. Food insecurities as well as isolation became and becoming homebound became a daily disturbance that contributed to a lot of older adults experiencing decline in mental, physical, and cognitive health. Loneliness and isolation are serious health risks for older adults, which can significantly increase a person's risk of dementia, heart disease, stroke, depression, anxiety, suicide, and premature death. And while things are improving and participation in older adult centers and other in-person resources is increasing, this pandemic is long from over. What is most concerning to me as we discuss reopening older adult centers is the continued low rates of vaccination amongst older adults. While the city average for vaccination amongst older adults is at 87.3%, with many age categories having vaccinated rates of 99%, those ages 75 and 84 have a vaccination rate of 85%, and those 85 and older have a vaccination rate of 68%. This is very concerning, especially given the data I previously mentioned on how older adults are the most vulnerable to COVID. These rates must improve. And also, it's not the first time we are raising the alarm on this. We brought this up, the older adult vaccination rate several times now at past hearings, and the rate has remained stagnant. So I hope to hear from the city on how we are doubling down on reaching more older adults and using spaces such as older adult centers. I've seen this work well when we've pushed for vaccination units near our senior centers and co-ops in the district. We've partnered with health and hospitals and T2 senior centers and houses of worship to make that happen, but we need to do more. And so I'm looking forward to hearing on how we can continue to invest resources to prevent isolation, food insecurity, and loneliness amongst our older adults. And I want to thank the administration for being here today, and I look forward to our discussion. And again, thank you to both chairs Hudson and Mealy, and the members of the subcommittee as well for joining us. But I also want to thank the subcommittee staff for their work on this issue. I want to thank Sarah, Harbani, Laura, my chief of staff, Megan Taddeo, and Carolina for helping get this wonderful hearing up and running. And now I'd like to turn it over to our moderator to go over the procedural aspect of the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Crystal Pond, Assistant Deputy Director to the Human Services Division, which oversees the Aging Committee and the two subcommittees in today's hearing. Before we begin today, I want to remind everyone that you will be on mute until you are called on to testify, at which point you will be unmuted by a member of our staff. We ask that all members of the administration who are testifying stay unmuted during the Q&A portion of admin testimony. I will be calling on public witnesses to testify after the conclusion of the administration's testimony and council member questions. So please listen for your name to be called. All hearing participants should submit written testimony to testimony@council.nyc.gov if you have not already done so. The deadline for submitting written testimony for the record is 72 hours after the hearing. I will now call on the following members of the administration to testify. Lorraine Cortez Vasquez, Commissioner of the Department for the Aging. Luella Byers, Assistant Commissioner for the Bureau of Community Services. Michael Ognibene, DFDA's Chief Operating Officer. Before we begin testimony, I will administer the oath to all members of the administration who will be testifying or will be available for questions. Please raise your right hand. I'll read the oath and call on each of you individually for a response. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions? Commissioner Cortez Vasquez.
Yes, I do.
Assistant Commissioner Byers.
I do.
Chief Operating Officer Ognibene.
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Commissioner Cortez Vasquez, you may begin your testimony.
Thank you so much, Crystal Pond. Good afternoon, Chairpersons Hudson, Chairperson Moya, and Chairperson Neely, and to the members of the Committee on Aging and the subcommittees on COVID recovery and resiliencies, as well as the Older Adult Club and Food Insecurity Subcommittee. I am Lorraine Cortez Vasquez, as you all know, and I'm also from the Commissioner from the Department for the Aging, and I'm joined today by Michael Ognibene, the Chief Operating Officer and First Deputy Commissioner, and Luella Byers, the Assistant Commissioner for the Bureau of Community Service. We're happy to join you today to discuss topics that we've discussed in the past and would love to reinforce certain areas of protecting older adults during the pandemic and the reopening of older adult centers. Our priorities are even more critical during the pandemic, as well as in the post-pandemic area, ensuring uninterrupted access to services for older homebound individuals, maintaining social engagement, combating food insecurity among all older adults. We are proud to have made such great strides during the pandemic and look forward to a continued recovery. I would be remiss to say that the Department for the Aging provision of service is done with a network of about 300 community-based service providers who are on the ground serving older adults every day. When the city shut down in March 2020, DFDA worked with our fellow agencies, our sister agencies, and other networks of dedicated providers to implement innovative approaches to provide uninterrupted services for older adults. For example, to help combat social isolation and loneliness during the pandemic, as well as to share valuable information, all programs, including older adult center staff and all other social service agencies under the responsibility of the Department for the Aging, had contacted members regularly through social engagement calls. Ongoing engagement calls enabled older adults to have a consistent and regular connection to a familiar staff, and also with the goal to decrease social isolation. We constantly were assessing needs and linking the members with other vital resources. Since March 2020, DFDA and the provider network have made over 8 million social engagement calls, connecting with about 255,000 unduplicated older adults plus their caregivers. Services also pivoted to virtual, from congregate, from in-person, to allow older adults to maintain access. Prior to the pandemic, 49 older adult centers provided virtual programming and quickly got into to starting this approach during the pandemic, and that expanded to all centers. I am very proud of the robust virtual program classes that encompass a wide range of activities, including the more traditional classes, such as exercise or education, but also allowed for the development of some really innovative programming. Some centers did programs such as hybrid virtual photography, debate teams, senior spelling bee competitions. I remember in the Fort Greene Center going to being at the center and seeing how to organize an afternoon tea. Connecting, these programs have been extremely successful, and all centers will continue to offer some form of virtual program throughout the next contract. The lessons learned during the pandemic must be continued. That was a lesson, a major lesson learned, that it provides variety and increases accessibility to programming. In order to support access to virtual programming, address the digital divide, and combat social isolation, DFTR has distributed more than 9,000 tablets and free data plan to older adults, caregivers, and
Sorry, Commissioner, you seem to have been muted. I just lost you.
you mean to tell me I've been talking all this time?
No, it just happened a few seconds ago.
Okay. So I was gonna say no. What was the last thing you heard, Chairwoman Hudson? About
9,000 laptops and internet
Yeah, 9,000 tablets.
tablets.
We have distributed, and we will have one more distribution in a week or so in the South Bronx. That is in addition to the 10,000 tablets that we gave earlier in the year to residents who live in public housing facilities. Through this initiative, DFTA prioritized those clients with the highest risk of social isolation and who live in tree neighborhoods. Neighborhoods identified by the Task Force on Racial and Equity and Inclusion. Neighborhoods that were hardest hit by COVID-19 pandemic. This follows the new research from DFTA's found that more older adults view technology as a way to stay connected than they did before COVID-19. No surprise there, given the increased virtual programming. In addition, 4 out of 5 adults aged 50 plus rely on technology to stay connected and in touch with family and friends. We know that education on the use of technology and increased access to devices and connectivity are essential for programming to be successful. We continue to provide funding for technology education and libraries for older adult centers. As you know, the older adult centers were authorized to reopen for in-person services starting in June 20th. Prior to June 20th, there was a demand for the centers to reopen, but we followed the health guidance. And in partnership with the Department for the Health, we were able to authorize opening on June 20th. Within this guidance, capacity at all centers was set at 25% at any given time. On March 21st, all older adult centers, a year later, were authorized to return to 100% capacity just a few weeks ago, following updated guidance. So any guidance that was in place before was superseded by this new guidance. COVID-19 prevention measures and guidance remain in effect, which those include mask requirements, distancing, and health screenings. We also understand that there are factors that lead to lower in-person participation rates, such as variants and upticks in positivity rates, unknown vaccination status of fellow attendees, and the center staff capacity. All of those affect the participation rates, and we've seen an uptick. We saw a great uptick in participation rates, even with the 25% limitation. And the minute Omicron came, that went down immediately. So far in FY 2022, we have seen roughly 16,200 average is the average daily participation rate, which is based on a 25% capacity restriction. All centers offer meals, including congregate and or grab and go. Virtual programs have continued at all centers. In addition to in-person programming has also increased. We continue to offer a wide range of options for older adults to engage in so that they can make the choice that is best for them. We continue to have conversations with providers on a regular basis on how they will engage with former members and how they can reach new participants, because the pandemic also identified thousands of older adults who had never engaged with DIFTA in the past or any DIFTA programs. When older adult centers closed for in-person gatherings, DIFTA quickly transitioned operations to ensure that members continue to have healthy nutrition meals, and the nutrition meals pivoted to grab and go, and then a centralized direct service delivery, which eventually merged with the city's broader emergency food initiative called Get Food INC. All older adults receive meals through Get Food until November 2021, when the remaining participants were transitioned to the temporary 60+ recovery meals. Michael Ogdebeni will testify on the recovery meals. Michael?
Three chairs and members of the committee and the subcommittee. As noted earlier, in June 2021, older adult centers received guidance from Department of Health to reopen for in-person programming, including meals. Since then, over 2.7 million congregate and grab-and-go meals have been served at older adult centers. In the fall of 2021, with the end of Get Food NYC, DIFTA launched the 60+ Recovery Meals Service, a temporary meals delivery service for former Get Food participants who are 60 years of age or older and in need of meals. As we approach the end of recovery meals in June, DIFTA is working to ensure that older adults identify alternatives to the temporary service. On March 7th, we mailed postcards to all 60+ Recovery Meals participants, reminding folks that the Recovery Meals service is scheduled to end by June 30th. Beginning last week, a survey was included with all the recovery meal deliveries, with a goal to better understand more about the meals recipients and to identify appropriate off-ramp alternatives. Meanwhile, older adult centers are reaching out to participants that have been receiving recovery meals to welcome them back to the Oak for meals and other programs. The Recovery Meals Call Center has been making outgoing calls to participants to follow up on the survey, and the HRA's Public Engagement Unit is making calls to recovery meals recipients that are otherwise not known to DIFTA. Our vaccine efforts. Keeping older adults safe during the pandemic also included providing information about the changing pandemic and eventually facilitating access to vaccination and boosters. As we know, homebound individuals and older adults have been particularly vulnerable throughout the pandemic. In addition to sharing medically accurate and up-to-date information about COVID and how to safely navigate that pandemic, DIFTA and our network of providers assisted with vaccination efforts for older adults. DFTA was among the first city agencies to support the efforts of the Vaccine Command Center for the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine to vulnerable populations. DFTA activated our provider network to contact older adult clients to distribute information about the vaccine, as well as assist older adults with scheduling their appointments, including in-home appointments and free transportation to those appointments. DFTA and its provider network increased awareness and mitigated misinformation via calls, emails, flyers, and meetings, including several town hall events. Last summer, DFTA partnered with DOHMH, Department of Health, to produce a television commercial PSA in both English and Spanish to emphasize vaccination among older adults. In December, DFTA launched the Stop Rampage PSA campaign, a COVID-19 vaccination PSA public service announcement for older New Yorkers. It has been featured on television, newspaper, print, and digital sites, social media, and outdoor media, like bus shelters. The English and Spanish video PSAs are currently airing on local television channels. And I believe we're going to pause here for a quick run of this video.
By the time you meet me, it's too late. I'm Rampage. I'm a coronavirus. And your healthy cells are my guilty pleasure. I'll enter your body and head for your lungs. Then I'll smother you with my Rampage love. Why am I talking to older New Yorkers? You're vulnerable and easy to get. I'll tell you something else. Doctors are my enemy. They know my weakness, like I know yours. So talk to a doctor. But don't wait too long. I'm just around the corner.
Thank you. The vaccination administration efforts themselves included the following: more than 40 of our older adult centers and over a dozen naturally occurring retirement centers hosted vaccine hubs. The majority of Oaks and Norks assisted with the vaccination scheduling outreach, which included hundreds of provider staff calling and messaging older adults. 50+ mobile vaccination clinics partnered with DFTA providers to host vaccination and test events at or near provider locations, and robocalls in multiple languages to older adult clients providing information regarding the COVID vaccine. DFTA worked with DOHMH to identify older adult centers with low vaccination rates amongst their respective constituents. Resources were allocated to those neighborhoods and community-based partners to increase vaccination uptake among those populations. We also supported the city's in-home vaccination program, as well as the TREE Neighborhood Vaccine Initiative. According to the VCC, there were 33,000 doses administered to individuals 65 plus through the at-home vaccination program, roughly half of the total amounts of doses administered. DFTA and its providers were able to directly schedule and refer tens of thousands of older New Yorkers for COVID vaccination appointments at city-operated vaccination hubs. The vaccination effort continues as DFTA is partnering with Health and Hospitals Test and Trace Division to deploy mobile vaccination and testing clinics throughout the 5 neighborhoods. We cannot reiterate enough how important our provider and community partnership network has been through this 2-year process. Calling older adults, helping to schedule appointments, disseminating information, and advocating for local sites for host testing and vaccination events. Our partners continue to advocate for and provide support to their communities. We appreciate their efforts.
I will conclude by saying that we've learned a great deal from this pandemic through the collaborations with our community partners. And we will ensure continuity of services during the COVID pandemic and beyond. I'm glad that we have reached a point where older adults can be invited back 100% to in-person services. Our partnership with the council, service providers, advocates, and older adults themselves are the key to shaping the future of our centers and of our city. We want to be the most age inclusive city. As we work collectively to meet the ongoing needs of the aging services that face these extraordinary circumstances during the past 2.5 years. And with that, I conclude and welcome your questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Before I turn to Chair Hudson for questions, I'd like to remind council members to use the raise hand function in Zoom to indicate that they have a question for this panel. Please remember to keep questions and answers to 5 minutes. Panelists from the administration, please stay unmuted if possible during this question and answer period. I will now turn it over to Chair Hudson.
Thank you so much, Crystal. Thank you, Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner and CFO for your testimonies. In February 2022, DFTA reissued the Oak/NORC RFP after finding that 5 neighborhoods were underserved in the initial RFP. Those neighborhoods were Crown Heights in Brooklyn, West Harlem Morningside Heights in Manhattan, and Corona, Jamaica, and Springfield Gardens and Laurelton in Queens. The goal of the RFP is to have at least 1 contract per neighborhood for a starting contract date of July 1st of this year. Are there any updates you can provide today about the reissued Oak RFP? And is DFTA receiving more robust responses? What's the status of the RFP process, et cetera?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. The application process closed, I believe, last Thursday. We did get responses, and we're in the process now of reviewing those responses, and are with the commitment that those programs will start July 1st, as all the other programs. So we were very pleased to have the opportunity to ensure that we received a more robust response, as I testified in the last hearing. And also in our commitment to make sure that equity and inclusion was also addressed through this effort.
Thank you. Before I get to my next question, I forgot to mention that we've also been joined by Councilmember Brooks Powers. Does the new RFP address any lingering inequities that still existed between Oaks after the model budget process?
That's a wonderful question, because the entire RFP process was to address expansion, which that in itself was addressing inequities. In addition to addressing inequities and narrowing historical funding inequities, the Department for the Aging, as I testified last month, made sure that every provider had a minimum of 10% indirect costs, something that was not possible, was not available to many of the small ethnic community-based organizations. So that addressed some of the funding inequity. And we are doing the same thing with this RFP, having a base indirect cost, so that the goal moving forward with all our efforts is to narrow those historical funding gaps, because what's required now is expansion to address, new growing diversity in the aging population. That said, I want to be real clear that in this RFP process, no one lost money. Everyone gained money, but what we did was we expanded and included new participants into this aging network field.
Okay, thank you. In 2018, DFTA went through a model budget process for programming and then for food. How did that model budget process influence the new RFP for Oaks?
The model budget process was one of the bases, and it was included in not only the RFP, but in many of the supplemental questions that come after the release of the RFP, supplemental data information directives. And the model budget is a basis for that, so what we have, if I remember correctly, and we'll get you that at a later date, but the model budget process, which was an ideal process that was led by the city council, established that no center should be operating with less than, I think the threshold is either 350 or 400,000. Forgive me for not having that exact number. I can get that for you. And so that was one phase. The first phase was looking at model budget that included staffing for kitchen staffing and salaries. And so that was another part of the model budget process. Does that answer you, or is that too?
Yeah, and I was going to ask actually about, you just mentioned the kitchen staff and meals, and we know that the model food budget raised the funding at Oaks for that. But what exactly did the extra funding cover, and was it enough to address inequities across older adult centers?
So what, and I can get you more details on that because I don't have that in front of me. So what I'm doing is I'm talking to you from what I recall, which might not be the latest or the most accurate information. But what it did include was a pattern, a suggested pattern for staffing. For example, if you have X number of meals, the staff composition should, kitchen staff composition should be 1 staff, 2 cooks, whatever that pattern was. So that it included looking at output, looking at what were the necessary staff components to satisfy that. I can get you the elements of the model budget after this hearing, but I don't have that in front of me. But I know it was a staffing pattern, salary increases for kitchen staff, as well as a baseline budget for older adult clubs. Okay.
Okay. And what about like inflationary costs? Was that taken into consideration? The additional cost?
Yeah, no, at that time, there was no inflationary cost added because we're not experiencing inflation. We have since been in conversation with OMB around inflationary costs for older adult centers, as well as all meal provision programs that we have.
Okay. And sorry, can you may have mentioned this briefly, but were the raised salaries for kitchen staff from the model budget maintained in the new RFP?
Yes, it guided and informed the RFP.
Okay, thanks. There have been anecdotal reports that Oaks have been asked to do more with the same amount of funding. Were any Oaks told in the RFP negotiating process that they would be expected to deliver more services or serve more clients with the same or less funding? I know you said earlier there was no reduced funding. Everybody got.
I can say, yeah, great. I can say unequivocally that everyone in this RFP process got an increase in funding, whether it was an increase in indirect costs. Many programs got indirect costs that were never provided before. But I can say unequivocally, did programs get as much funding as they wanted? Probably not, because the goal here was not to increase funding for particular programs, but the goal here was expansion to deal with service gaps as well as service inequities. So did everybody get what they wanted? Absolutely not. We don't have enough funding to give everyone what we believe they would like and we would like to see them get. But no one got a decrease in funding.
And given the RFP covered 31 centers rather than the 25 planned, and DFTA will be adding 5 more with the reissued RFP, how is DFTA funding the extra 11 Oaks and Norks?
These 5 that we reissued were part of the 31. We didn't issue the full 31 because we didn't get adequate responses. So these 5 were included in that 31 expansion.
Okay, so then technically that's 6 extra, right? How are you funding those extra 6 then?
Because we already gave out funding that would cover the number of RFPs that we were responding to. So let me say this differently. We issued an RFP. The goal was to fund 25 more. We identified 31 more. But when we did our review, we saw that these 5 neighborhoods were did not get the adequate response required that we felt deserved. And so that money and those RFPs were pulled out of the pool.
Okay, understood. I've got plenty more questions, but I want to make sure my colleagues have an opportunity to ask some questions as well. So I will turn it over to Chair Mealy, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Chair Hudson. Thank you for your testimony and your staff. I just have about 3 questions. The food accessibility in FY 2022, while operating at 25% capacity, OACs had a daily average of 6,230 participants for congregate meals. Before the pandemic, OACs were serving 30,000 older adults a day. How can we ensure that older adults feel safe returning back to the centers, OACs?
So, okay. For the record, on average, pre-pandemic, the number of meals was 25,000. Okay, so I just want to be clear for the record. One of the things that we've done, and the testimony indicated, and as you just indicated, we have just recently opened up to 100% occupancy. And we expect that to have an uptick. For the safety of the older adult, we still have some guidance in place, which are mask requirement, which is some health screening requirements, or optional really. And we also have a distance requirement, or a suggested distance for particular activities. So all of those things are keeping in mind the health and safety of the older adult is the most important. And we monitor those regularly and ensure that they are the most appropriate guidance offered for that point in time. So our goal is, yes, 100% occupancy, but as long as the safety and the health of the older adult trumps occupancy.
Okay, and just to talk about the little video, I got kind of scared a little. The virus was coming after me. Do you think that was, yeah. But
in real life, it was. In real life, the virus was going after people who were over 60. That's the reality.
Yeah. So how is that being out there for our seniors? Because now a lot of seniors may watch TV, may not. Some get online or play casino on their phone. So what part of that I think it was 2 million we gave in regards to marketing, how much went to doing that for our seniors? I guess it was that video, what other outreach?
No. I want to be clear. That video did not in any way impact the outreach efforts of the older adult clubs. That video was undertaken by DFTA, paid for by DFTA's administrative resources. The 2 million that you're referring to for outreach is in community, so community centers can continue to do outreach.
So what are they doing to, is it mailing? Is it constant contact? Blowing the horn? What are they doing with that?
They're doing everything that you said and then some. We have, because outreach was a new element that we focused on for older adult clubs. What we did was ask the providers what was and Luella addresses this on a regular basis with them. We canvass them. What's working? What are some of the best practices? And we are pulling together a work group so that we could have shared knowledge, as we have had with the video programming, shared knowledge around the colleagues. What are some of the most impactful outreach efforts? But currently, it's flyers, it's mailers, it's working with local community groups, it's calling. It is also, many of them are planning new large activities in preparation for the summer. So again, all kind of separate engagement activities. Some are large group, some are individually focused.
Okay, what is the mandate from your department to the directors in regards to showing vaccination cards coming into the senior centers? I know upstate they are doing it. Are we required, or has that just vanished right now?
The new guidance trumps the old guidance. When we were at 25%, some congregate activities required a proof of vaccination if you wanted to participate in a congregate activity. Those, given the science, given where we are now in this pandemic, that has been lifted and that has been replaced with a 100% occupancy rate with some requirements such as masking, some health guidance, and social distancing.
Not vaccination. So
there is no requirement for proof of vaccination. That was from an old guidance.
Okay. This is my last question. Many older adults are increasingly, fearful of walking to and from centers as a result of the rise in hate crimes and other public safety concerns. Does DIPTA have any plans included in older adults in the large public safety discussions and plans that are ongoing? Like more vans to take seniors, pick them up or drop them off? Anything has been addressed in the public safety in regards to our seniors?
Public safety is always a large concern and for the Department for the Aging. And we have elder abuse programs to support programs. And we also provide information on safety provisions. It is a major concern for us. It has been a major concern for us in the last months because of the anti-Asian attacks. So it is something that we're very vigilant of, and we work very closely.
Do you have a plan for that in regards to that? Is there any plan to set forth? Because it is happening, like you said, especially with the aging, but all our seniors are vulnerable at this state and time. So is there anything regarding transportation, buddy walking together? Have the Center of Department of Aging put anything in place for like a safety package for our seniors?
We work in partnership with our providers, and we won't mandate that they put something in place. I have full confidence in the provider's knowledge of a particular community, and and we will support the provider's efforts for any effort that they put in place to address whatever the concerns are of the older adults at that time. So if you're asking me, am I giving additional vans, or if DIFTA is putting that in place?
If it's a plan for to make sure our seniors are safety, that it could trickle down to all the senior centers. It could be just a memo, just to let them know you are a vulnerable population. Be safe, be careful, try to be in pairs. That's all I'm trying to say. Are we talking to them and letting them be a part of this public safety awareness?
DIFTA has issued 2 statements around public safety and its concern, particularly on hate crimes and overall senior vulnerability. And we remind everyone in those two statements that we have issued in the last few months regarding the resources that are available. And I repeat that I have full confidence in the local community service provider and who will employ any approaches that they think that need to be supplemented to ensure the safety and the well-being of their members.
Also, our providers do work with the NYPD. The NYPD will come in, and they've been doing this virtually also. So they'll come in and give safety tips on everything from robbery prevention, scams, or anything like that. So providers are very much aware and do work with the NYPD to educate the older adults as to how to protect themselves.
Okay, then I'm gonna turn it over to my colleagues. I can circle back. Thank you.
I believe now we'll turn it over to Chair Moya.
Thank you.
Unless Chair Hudson wanted to jump in. Sorry, I thought I heard it.
Thank you, Chair Moya. I apologize.
All right,
Oh,
Chair
no,
Moya.
it's okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Good to see you, Commissioner. Glad you're doing well. I just want to focus in on a couple of things, which is you mentioned in the testimony a lot about the outreach that's been done to promote a lot of the services that you've been talking about. And I believe, Mr. Agnabeni, you brought this up, and excuse me if I got it wrong, but I was making notes while you were giving your testimony. You spoke about a program that was transporting seniors to get the vaccination. You mentioned that in your testimony.
No, it was taking vaccines to people's homes.
Oh, so
Michael Atzer has, yeah.
to the home.
Michael, you could.
Sorry, I just want to get clarity on that. Is it for the home vaccination program, or was this transportation for seniors to a site that was giving the vaccine? Because I heard you mention a couple of things.
It was a little of both.
Okay.
It was a little. Yes, we participated in a big in-home vaccination effort. At the same time, we asked our older adult centers that had transportation set up to help mobilize some of their older adults.
So the transporting aspect that you talked about in your testimony was not the agency itself providing vans to transport seniors to get a vaccination. You were then just reaching out to providers who had the vans or had transportation available to
Exactly.
give that as an option. Okay, I just wanted to make clear that it wasn't the agency itself that was providing that.
Right.
Oh,
right.
no, Chairman Moya, there's very few, for the record, there's very few services, as you know us quite well, that we provide directly. So
Right.
to older adults, you know?
Right. That's why I just wanted to get clarity on that, because you spoke about it in two different parts, and I just wanted to make sure I was clear that this wasn't
Absolutely.
the agency doing it. Okay. To the home vaccination program. When did you begin to start that program for in-home vaccinations? And also, to date, how many seniors have been vaccinated through your efforts through the in-home vaccination program?
Michael, I'm going to start and then I'm going to pivot to you, all right?
Yep.
When the home vaccination program started, Councilmember Moya, it started with the Older Adult Initiative. So from the inception of an in-home vaccination program, it started it was a partnership with the fire department and the Department for the Aging and some other EMS staff.
But what was the date? What was the date? I'm looking for the exact start of when DFTA partnered up with all the other agencies to start.
I would
providing
say,
in-home.
can I jump in, Lorraine?
Absolutely, and take it from there and give him the number, which is 30.
Right.
Well, the number.
Right. We were still at home. We've been here since June of last year. We were still working at home when this started. So I would want to say late winter, meaning February, March, or March, April of 2021, the in-home began.
We'll give you the exact date because there was a press conference. There was a press conference between the former fire chief, Bill DeBlanc, former mayor, and myself. And we can get you the exact date, council member.
Okay, thank you. And then to date, how many seniors have been vaccinated through the in-home vaccination program?
Yeah, I included in my remarks 33,000 as per from the VCC. That's 65 plus, and that's about half of all the in-home that was administered.
Okay. Because I'm just trying to, I know we're touting this, but you know, being in the epicenter of the pandemic, you know, we're talking close to almost a year after the pandemic began to start offering that in-home service to seniors.
No,
No, it was the vaccine didn't begin until late 20.
Right, but you're saying, I'm sorry, when did you say the program began exactly? Because I remember this being a very big lag time between when the vaccines were being offered and being rolled out. We had the issue, which I'll get to in a minute as well, that deals specifically with the digital divide here. But the services that were being provided as we were giving categories out, remember, it started out with the older population first. When we kept asking for this, because many homebound seniors could not get to the vaccination sites, the whole host of issues. I'm just trying to get timing from when that was available to when our seniors were able to get their vaccinations.
I'll give you the exact date so that we're not fabricating anything. That initiative started about maybe a month or so after vaccines, right? 8 weeks at the top. It was the advocacy of council members. It was the advocacy of then Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer. It was the advocacy of certain of other leaders that said we need to address in-home. And it was only a matter of weeks between when vaccination started to when we started this initiative with the fire department. But we can get you those exact dates. We don't have that in front of us right now. We can get you those exact dates so that you can see what the time period was.
I'm just trying to get the actual timetable of when and how many were done throughout that time period. And so I just want to now shift to talking a little bit more about equity, right? Where New Yorkers, many intersecting identities, such as older African-American Latinos that are living with a lot of underlying health conditions are at an increased risk of severe COVID-19 complications and death. So for all age groups, including those 75 and older, the rate of death was much higher for those who are African-American and Latino. What are we doing to better address the inequitable vaccine distribution among seniors of color?
What I can say to you, and Michael, you can take it. What I can say to you is all of our vaccination efforts, the priority was tree neighborhoods to address the two factors, the vulnerability of the older adult, and then the fact that they were in community, and those older adults that were in communities that were had historical health disparities that went unaddressed and that we discovered during the pandemic, or that were emphasized or escalated during the pandemic. So all of our efforts from the beginning were tree neighborhoods and older adults, right? And particularly older adults in tree neighborhoods. So that intersectionality was always very important and pivotal in our program design.
Okay, and so And are you now currently is like DFTA and the Department of Mental Health and Hygiene working together to sign up more seniors for the COVID vaccine?
We never stop looking at vaccination rates, because if you notice that vaccination rates for older adults citywide, it's about 89%. And one of the things that we continue to do is to make sure that those vaccination rates get higher than that. We are particularly interested in those boroughs where it may be lower, and that is key to us. And that is for those individuals, it's 89% citywide for those who have received the first dose. And for those who have received, who are fully vaccinated, the rate is 83%. So our goal is to constantly monitor those numbers and to constantly look at increasing that vaccination rate.
Got it. And now to something that we know has a huge impact, not just on my district, but in a lot of areas here in New York City, which is seniors with limited English proficiency and the digital literacy. And so while individuals from age 60 and above make up just 20% of the city's population, they also represent 36% of New Yorkers with no internet connection at home. And furthermore, half of New Yorkers aged 80 and above lack access to the internet at home. I know you mentioned some of this in your testimony, and excuse me if I missed it, but how has DFTA been working together to reach seniors who lack digital literacy and seniors with limited English proficiency who have been isolated with the lack of internet connectivity? You know, how are both agencies working together to reach those seniors of those two populations that I just mentioned?
So we've worked very, very hard, and I'm glad, because I'm going to throw the technology and the accessibility and affordability of internet back to you, because I think that's an issue we all have to address. It's an issue that has been concerned for us. All older adults generally have, older adult centers have internet access. And everyone who has received the tablet has been given free internet access for a year, you know, as they develop that. The concern for us, as you so well stated, but didn't say explicitly, is the accessibility to internet and the affordability of internet. And that's something that we need to continue to address, because it not only affects older adults, but it affects all income communities of low income.
Right. Okay. And look, I just have two more questions, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues. Obviously, you know, the impact of isolation has been a huge concern. The impact that it has on the health of our seniors, which include mental health, cognitive health, and mobility. How is DFTA addressing the impact of the pandemic with program activities that you're doing currently to help mitigate that issue?
There are two approaches that we've used, probably three approaches that we've used to mitigate social isolation. As we mentioned, we have engaged with the network of providers, have done over 8 million wellness calls, check-in calls to older adults to make sure that they are not isolated and to just check in on their well-being. In addition to that, we have also provided something called Friendly Visiting, which is a service that was done virtually during this pandemic, where you have a connection to an older adult and a volunteer, a trained volunteer for a sustained period of time. And then we've also employed other methodologies like you just said, the virtual programming has been an essential methodology that we did to make sure that there was connectivity during this pandemic and that people can have the socialization and the entertainment that they sought from older adult clubs and were unable to have it because of the inability to congregate personally.
Okay, it's my last question here. There are core services for seniors that are not considered core services. For example, with case management. Why aren't the senior centers that are already doing case management, even though they have case assistants, have case management funding? And how many senior centers in the last 2 years have been bumped up from case assistant to case management?
Right. They're two very distinct services, right? And case assistance is available at, through all older adult centers, right? And they provide a myriad of services as well as assistance with applications for health benefits, for income benefits, and also they can do some interim supports for family members. Case management is the entree to all of the in-home services, as well as for those most vulnerable older adults who have critical needs. That is a more specialized assessment process that is offered through the case management agencies. And that's the distinction between those. Case assistance is, if you were looking at escalating support and assistance, case assistance is some information and referral is the lowest intervention and entry point. Then there is case assistance. And then for the more vulnerable and those with the greatest needs, there is case management services.
Right. So, I guess what it is what I saw in particular in my some of the senior centers in my district was that the case assistance during this whole pandemic, senior was homebound, unable to do things that are critical for their own health, like the dishes, throwing out garbage, things that you mentioned, case management. What would it take to make the chore services, the program is already offered there, the chore services as a core service that DFTA would fund?
It would require the specialization and the staff at each senior center. And, that is...
But folks are already doing that. That's why I'm asking. Is they're already
doing folks are doing case assistance. Absolutely right. Councilman.
Right.
Everyone in a senior center, there is a case assistance component. But if we're talking about this higher level assessment, that is done by the case management agencies. And those agencies become the feeder agencies for home care, become the feeder agencies for home delivered meals, become the feeder agencies for any other high level need that an older adult has.
Right, but some senior centers are doing case management beyond the case assistance already, but they don't have the funding. So my question goes back to how are we looking to address that in terms of funding senior centers that are already providing this service but not getting the funding for it?
There is no senior center unless they have a case management contract that's providing case management assistance services. They are providing they're providing case assistance.
Right, but they're doing the services that case management does, but they're labeled as case assistants, and they never get the funding for doing the work there. That's what I'm trying to get at, Commissioner. And if you like, we can talk about it, offline.
Yeah, no, I would love to get an example because I would love to get some examples because, council member, that is not how
Elmcor Senior Center. I can tell you, I can name a bunch.
Sure.
And can tell you
Would
what
love to,
they've
I
done
would love to
and all
discuss
that.
those.
So that's why I just wanted to I wanted to get to why these senior centers in the districts that have been hardest hit can't get the funding for the services that they're providing because they are labeled as case assistants, not case management, but yet they're doing the work of case management. So again, we can talk about it offline, Commissioner. I just really want to be able to figure out how we solve that problem because it's a much needed issue that really deals with funding, getting the appropriate funding to these centers that are providing critical services to our senior population.
Luella, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
Not really. I would like to see those programs also.
Happy to do
Right,
that.
and I think Council, thank you, Luella. I think Council Member, it really does warrant a further discussion as to like what's those gradation, between case assistance and case management, and what kind of funding would be required for some interim level of case assistance and between
Look,
case
I
assistance.
think all senior centers should have the funding for it. They're doing the services. They're helping people apply for SNAP. They're doing all of these things. This should be something that should be funded for all of our senior centers. Look, I don't want to take up any more time. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Commissioner. Sorry.
No. I was going to say, and just for clarity's sake and for the record, those are considered case assistance services and not case management services.
I understand that. The point that I've been making is
I got it.
that they do more than that. So that's the reason why I brought this up.
Thank you. And it's an important point.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner.
Chair Moya.
Yes.
Chair Moya, before you leave, I just want to confirm. So I knew my memory was pretty good. When I said February or March of 2021, it was indeed late February of 2021 when the in-home vaccination started.
Got it. Thank you. And so from 2021, from February 2021 to now, it's been 33,000 in-home seniors that got vaccinated, correct?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. Let me turn it over to
so much, Council Member.
Our council to take over from here.
Thank you, Chair Moya. We will now turn to questions from other council members. Council Member Narcisse, you may ask your question, followed by Majority Whip Folks Powers.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon, Commissioner, and good afternoon, chairs. Moya, Millie, and of course, Chair Hudson. Thank you for the opportunity, and all the staff. I'm coming from a perspective of being a nurse and being administrator, part of Older Adult Day. What I realized during the height of the pandemic, we're not prepared. Everything was in chaos, and it was too much delay to react to the needs of the seniors. I'm in total agreement with Chair Moya saying all the services that the social daycare are giving, they're not getting paid. The reimbursement is ridiculous. You're getting about $60 to take care of a client, to give them 3 meals a day. The meal come about $3 and change. What can you get on that? $5 and change. And transportation, and you doing everything for those seniors. Everything. I mean, case management, case assistant manager. You do the Medicaid application. You do a housing application. Anything the seniors need, especially in a high-risk area. When we're talking about where the clients have language, the seniors have limited language proficiency. They don't speak the language, and you cannot reach them. I had to be out there myself, trying to locate them. They're scared, and the response from the DFDA was very, very slow. And we could not get meal. I have to purchase meal myself for the seniors before we can get what do we do. When they went home, we're not getting paid, but we had to provide the services. And then when the time that the city trying to get together to say, we're coming back, we're gonna provide the services, the meal was not culturally competent. The seniors were not eating them. So they were still calling us that was not getting paid at all, but we had to continue working to make sure that we provide the support that they needed, because they did not have meal at home. They were living alone. They were scared. And when we come to technology, most of them could not even have a decent phone to put on. So my whole thing is, what is the plan now moving forward if we have to deal with a pandemic or epidemic in our city? What are the policies you put in place that we as a community can support? Like Chair Moya said, there is many. I'm not part of a senior center, but I lived it. I lived it. I had to deliver meal every day with my own purchasing. I had to purchase food before I can get organization to come and try to help us out. So moving forward, I think and I believe that we have to do better. But coming from you, Commissioner, what are the policies put in place? What is being done so we don't fall into the same chaos if we have to deal with epidemic or pandemic?
With all due respect, it was one of the most challenging periods for everyone in this city. And immediately our providers, on March 16th, was when the city closed all congregate centers. And from that period, from March 16th, in a week's time, all of the network providers at DFTA went from a congregate meal program to a grab and go. The pandemic increased, and it became even more vulnerable. Older adults became even more vulnerable. And at that point, we needed to stop grab and go and go to a direct meal provision program. And so DFTA had Direct Meals 1. And we were providing, and we were prepared to provide meals, and did so for 25,000 older adults. What we found at that time, council member, was that increased from 25 to 44,000. And at that point, the mayor also concurrently put in place a food czar, because the capacity outgrew the capacity that the Department for the Aging had. So we went from our 25 traditional, which we were able to handle, went from grab and go to a direct service. That grew in 1 week's time to 44,000. Our systems could not adapt that way. And fortunately, the city put in a Get Food program that was to address all of the food insecurity needs. And you and I know that there was lots of conversations about the cultural competency of that program at that time, and about the quality of food. And it was something that the Get Food program was constantly working to address. It was just the magnitude of the demand was so high at that period. We've learned so much thanks to all of the advocates who gave us suggestions. We've learned so much that I am proud that when we went from a transition from Get Food to recovery, it was a seamless process. So that is one lesson that we've learned. The other lesson that we've learned is to always have a variety of modalities. And so that is the other thing that we've learned. And we've also upped our emergency plan. All programs in DFTA had emergency planning before, but this was something that was totally unprecedented for the city and for the world. And it was pivoting as much as we can, always with the safety of the older adult in mind. Were there things that could have been done differently and faster? Absolutely, absolutely. But the demand kept outpacing the capacity at any given time. We've learned that, and so now we plan for more than, rather than for what exists. That's one thing. The other thing I want to be real clear, Councilwoman, that I want to make the distinction between social adult daycare centers, which provide all of the service you were talking about. Those are not the older adult clubs. Older adult senior centers, older adult day centers are something operated by the states that, I know that you know, but I want to just make that distinction. All right, they are not senior centers. Very, very different form of services, very different client populations.
Commissioner, can you tell us, I believe my colleague asked, what is the plan going forward? In China right now, they are on lockdown. What plan that we could specifically see that if this ever happened again, what is in place? That's all. And she could speak for herself, but I would love to know because I asked that question before. So thank you. I don't know if she's available now, council member.
Yes. What's the plan moving forward? I understand the difference because I've been in the field for a long time, for over 30 years. But what I'm saying, the same thing that we were dealing with is the same thing the OACs was dealing with as well. Because there was delay, we all went to a spin trying to do the best we can. Because once you care for seniors, they become your family because you know all their stories. You cannot turn your back. So what I want to see that DFDA do a plan and put a policy. What is the thing that we're gonna do if that a pandemic, because we're still in the pandemic, by the way, if we are dealing with any new one or any epidemic, what do we do for the seniors? Because seniors, we talk the rhetoric all the time. Seniors, we're standing on their shoulders, but we don't making plan for seniors, especially they live alone. They only have one place to go to see people. They don't see anyone else. And what I said, language is a big deal in the Black and Brown community. And on top of it, the reimbursement of the senior centers, what they're getting, when you're looking at, it doesn't match for the services they have to give. Now, you just mentioned during the height of the pandemic, when you have to give the vaccine, you rely back on the centers to use the transportation while they were not getting paid for the services. But we have to do it because we're human, we're dealing with people, which I know you are too, because I know you care, but it's just like the services, we have to keep in mind what we ask people to do. You cannot ask people to do something that they don't have. Like you cannot expect blood coming out of a rock. So you cannot ask somebody to do something they don't have or provide something they don't have.
All right, so let me try to unpack some of that. What I can say to you for the last issue that you raised, during the shutdown period, programs were being funded. The only funding that was not available to them for a short period of time was food funding because meal funding was being provided by Essential Source. But all of the staffing money, all of the program money, none of that money was taken away from senior centers. Now we're talking about 2.5 years ago, all right? So I want to put that in perspective. So none of the funding was taken away from senior centers other than for senior centers, food money was taken away, right? Because they were not providing food services. In terms of a plan, right now, we work very closely with the Department of Health. We've just 2 weeks ago, with the Department of Health, have lifted the requirements to 100% occupancy. I can guarantee you, and we've also maintained the mask mandate. I can guarantee you that this city and this Department of Health are being extremely vigilant. And should there be a change, and should there be a change that requires a shutdown of older adult centers, it will happen within a matter of time. We have the experience now of how to get food directly, and we have the number of providers beyond our own providers, how to get food to older adults in their homes, should that be required. We already have that experience and we will build on that experience. And those are the policies that we have in place. But we respond to what the science says and also really take the lead of our Department of Health, who are constantly monitoring this.
Yeah, but you know, most of the food end up in the garbage, by the way, because they're not culturally competent, because the people are not eating them. So that's the plan I'm talking about. If we have, because we don't want them to starve. And then what most of us had to do is to look for food for those seniors. So now moving forward, if we can look at that, and then the message, like Dr. Shutsky mentioned, that the message have to come from a trusted voice, right? So if we can use like TV or radios to send the message out, because most of the seniors did not know what to do. And then we have to do it in the language that in each area based on where they're at. So you cannot send messages in English where most people don't speak English. It has to be, that's the equity that I would like to see as well moving forward.
Thank you, but that has all been put in place already. All of our messages come in multiple language, and as a result of and I just want to be clear that I want to address for you, because we're talking about things that happened 2.5 years ago. As the result of some of the feedback that we got, immediately the food, we started looking for, not us, Get Food, and currently with our recovery programs, we look for providers who can provide those ethnic and cultural foods, and also to meet religious requirements. So that was done. Was it done from day one? Absolutely not. Was it a lesson learned? Absolutely. Is it something moving forward that will never be repeated? Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move to Majority Whip Brooks Powers, followed by Councilmember Brewer.
Time starts now.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chairs Hudson, Mealy, and Moya for today's hearing. Just a real quick few questions for you, Commissioner. According to our hearing materials, DFTA found that among other neighborhoods, Springfield Gardens and Laurelton, which are in my district, were underserved by the initial RFP issued last year. DFTA reissued the RFP in February. So I'd like to know what outreach the agency conducted in the neighborhoods that were underserved by the initial RFP. I'd like to also know, has the agency since identified providers in my district to apply for the RFP? Is the agency on track to meet the goal of having at least one contract per neighborhood by July 1st? I'd also like to know, in DFTA's view, how do, and I'm just pivoting real quick in terms of like the vaccination rates among the older adults and the OAC residents relative to the general population. I just wanted to kind of see from your perspective, how are you seeing the risk levels differing from boroughs and neighborhoods? And is DFTA reopening the facilities at different rates across the city?
All right, so I want to answer your RFP question. The RFP, thank you so much. You know that it was important for us to reissue the RFP in those particular districts that you talked about, and some that you didn't mention, like West Harlem, as well as Corona, Queens, and Fort Greene, or that community. Because we didn't get enough responders to address the issues that we were hoping to address in those particular communities. That RFP opened in February. It just closed, I believe, last Thursday. And we have gotten we've gotten responses for each one of the communities. And we are reviewing those right now. And that's what I could share with you because we're still in the RFP process. We did all of the outreach that was done before. And in addition to that, we reached out to community groups and to some leaders to say, this RFP is out. You should look at who in the community should be responding to that. So that's for that. And what was the second question?
In terms of the RFP or in terms of the COVID?
The opening, we are not doing a rolling opening. We've identified a date, and I'll give you the example of last June. When we opened at that point, that became each program decides when they're ready and able to open, and that's the same thing happening now. 2 weeks ago, we said they can open for 100% capacity. they will open, when and able that they're ready. There are lots of issues that they have to address. They've been occupied at 25% limitation. So now they have to prepare to open at 100%. We still give them the guidance that we believe will be the most prudent guidance with the Department of Health for the safety issues such as masking, health screenings, and some distancing. But, are we doing it by community? No, to answer you specifically. We believe that each one of the partners and providers will know when they're ready and able to open.
So DFDA is not really monitoring the varying risk levels across the different boroughs?
No, we're monitoring. Are we talking about vaccinations? Or are we talking about openings? We're monitoring and are in constant contact with people around the opening. All right.
Right. So just to clarify my question, or my statement rather, I wanted to get your perspective on how the risk levels may differ across the boroughs and neighborhoods. So that was one question. And then I had followed up with, is DFDA reopening the older adult centers at different rates across the city? So just to clarify.
So we constantly monitor with the city the different impacts on communities. As I said earlier in my testimony, and I've said in earlier hearings, that the tree neighborhoods became the focus. Those neighborhoods most impacted by COVID were the neighborhoods that we've targeted many of our efforts for. That's first priority, and then we scale it up to others. So yes, we monitor that very carefully. And again, in terms of the openings, it is the center that determines when they're able and ready to open.
And what I'm trying to get from the question is, when I asked about the different rates across the city, I'm trying to see if we're seeing in certain communities a slower opening and what the root cause may be in terms of why some communities may have a longer delay in terms of being comfortable in reopening their facilities for the older adults.
I don't know that I can answer that. I know that we are monitoring it citywide. I know that the programs are in constant touch with their members and what are the resistance to coming back to a center. But I don't know that I could answer, is there one neighborhood that's distinct from another and that causal is why they're opening or not opening. I'm not prepared, nor do I have enough information to give you a precise answer for that.
Now, would you be able to provide the committee with the data in terms of like what the numbers are in terms of reopening across the city?
Oh, sure, we could do that. But just remember, Majority Whip and Council Member, that changes every day, right? So today there might be, 69 of them open, and tomorrow it'll be 118. So we could provide you that for a point in time, and then give you an update if you want it at a later time. So we can give you that for what that is today. All right.
And my last question for you is, does DFDA have adequate resources to continue testing and vaccinating older adult center residents?
We have just given out, Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, about 500,000 testing kits are available for all of the older adult centers, and so home testing kits are available. DFDA doesn't do vaccination itself. We work with the city vaccination centers. So what we do is develop plans so that we can make sure that our communities are utilizing those vaccination centers.
I'm here. This is Michael. I'm going to add 3 things to that. We have access to about that many test kits. We're going to be rolling them out in phases, though. We've already reached out to our programs and asked who needs what, number 1. Number 2, when you asked about outreach, every community-based organization that was pre-qualified to deliver older adult services received notice for the RFP. So everyone that was pre-qualified receiving notice. And the third thing I want to clarify is an earlier point about the number and the RFP originally. In fact, there were 36 new additional sites from the first RFP.
31.
36 new total. The 31 is separate from the 5. 5 plus 31 will be 36 new. The one distinction I will say is there's a difference between the funding for an older adult center versus a NORC, and that, allowed some flexibility.
Thank you for that, Michael, and thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, chairs.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. Up next, we have Councilmember Brewer.
Time starts now.
Thank you very much, Commissioner and Chair. So I have 5 quick questions. First of all is technology. So I am supportive of the Older Adult Center virtual programming and all the work that you're doing on technology. And I do want to say, just like Brookdale Center for Healthy Aging at Hunter College, you know well the wonderful folks there, and Live on New York, I want to find a way to provide universal tech support for seniors via 311. And I know you've been thinking about this. So I want to know what additional investments does DFTA require to expand tech access and tech literacy in the year coming up? And also, how are we going to get the libraries open more often and Tech Connect for in-person instruction on weekdays and weekends? And I say that because, with all due respect, I know exactly how hard it is to get the technology to the seniors at NYCHA or elsewhere, but they can't half the time use them, even though the senior centers try to provide that technology. And not senior centers not there all the time. I want 311 to be there. Number 2, I know that everyone works really hard to deal with this cost of living in New York City. And I know the council included $60 million for a cost of living adjustment for providers in our budget. I want to know if the administration supports that. DFTA needs more money. And I know maybe you can't say that, but we can. You've got to have more money. We all talk about parks, 1%. DFTA needs more money. We're getting older as a city. DFTA needs more money. Number 3, again, on the money front, I know that we're all trying to increase home delivered meal reimbursement. You heard that from my colleagues. But my understanding is it was in the mayor's preliminary budget, but providers have not yet seen that increase into their contracts. And as borough president, I fought for this hard. So I want to know, when will that be in the contracts? Number 4, you and I have talked, Commissioner, about JAFSA and the One Stop, and I know it wasn't possible to fund in the last go around. So I want to know if there's a new RFP. Would those services be able to be rebid in the new RFP? And 5, I do not like the for-profit, I don't know what they call themselves senior centers. They are not. Margaret Chin did everything she could to get rid of them. I want to know how we're going to get rid of them and use that money for the beloved older adult centers that you manage and that we love. I think they're taking our Medicaid money. And so I want to know how we're going to get rid of them. Thank you very much.
In terms of the, I'm trying to think of how do I unpack this. In terms of the technology, you're absolutely right. We really working together with you, working together with the mayor's office, the chief technology officer is really looking at this issue of expanding technology and expanding digital access to older adults. And as you so aptly said, the companion piece to that is the training. You can't access without knowing how to run the car or knowing how to run the car well is useless. So we've put a lot of effort into that. It is something that we're constantly looking at, and I cannot give you a dollar figure right now. But we're looking at, right now we have 20,000 tablets out there. We've been working with the network to see how many more tablets are necessary, how many, what that would require in terms of training, and we will have those kind of conversations with OMB. I'm very pleased to say right now that the mayor's office through and Deputy Mayor Williams also just to prove that we can use some designated state city CDBG money to increase digital access. And so we're really, I mean, that literally came hot off the press last night. So we're really pleased about that. So each one of those inches up closer to addressing this digital divide that we know exists. But it's incumbent upon all of us. There is a state law that says, talks about accessible access, digital access. We need to make sure that that gets, implemented. I believe that it's been bogged down in some sort of litigation, but that's a concern for us. We've created, and you'll be pleased to hear this, a lot of programs have digital libraries right now.
Time expired.
Am I limited in my response to her too?
No, keep going. I'm
Okay,
just making
we are working right now in creating sort of like a resource center, a digital library, so that every program could have access to state-of-the-art programming. And that is something that we're working on right now. And we hope that we could unveil sometime, during the end of the summer. And staff will kill me for saying that. In terms of the JASA contract, we can talk about that offline. JASA, the JASA was fully funded, and they made the decision not to continue with the one-stop center. In terms of the SADs, you're right. Former council member Chin, former chair Chin, this was one of the things that she wanted us to really be vigilant. The city doesn't have much control over it because it's a state-run program. But what we were able to do with the support of the joint leadership was to create an ombudsman program. So right now, what we do have is access to know who's registered, who is running as an older adult center. It gives us access to their information. It also gives people in the city of New York an additional place to lodge complaints other than just the state. And then we become very aggressive and active in the case and submit it to the state for rectification. It's been a concern for all of us, which is why we believe, council member, and I know you believe, in a community care plan that expands more services for quality home services in the community that can have older adults live with dignity in the communities that they help create. So it's a matter of looking at state policy and looking at some joint advocacy.
And then just to reimburse the issue of getting more money for the meals. When is that going to happen? Do we know? I wish Jose was on here. That contract amendment and registration process is going on now. Okay. And then that is for the initial 1058. And then right after that one, we're looking at the one that begins July 1st. All right. The
$11 something. Right.
I have it memorized too. Okay. And then the cost of living, what's going to go on with that?
The cost of
because we put some money, we put it in our budget. We just didn't know if you can say something to support the city. I know that's always the mayor.
What's going on here?
We put in $60 million for more money.
It's just that I just got my screen just blacked out. So if you can hear me, I will continue. Yes, you did. And yes, we support, anything that enhances older adult services at the community level, including the making sure that we have pay equity. You know that pay equity in the field of aging is something that we've taken a stand for and want to elevate the industry called Aging Network. So yes, you have, yes, we are in support of that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody. I could go on forever. I'll stop.
Yeah. I need people to know that for some reason my screen went blank. and all I can do is hear, all right?
Okay, we can
can
see
see
you
you.
and hear you. So seeing no other hands raised, I will turn it back over to Chair Hudson for a second round of questions.
Thank you so much. My first question is, on March 21st, DFTA notified providers that OAC or OAC capacity restrictions were lifted and programming could resume at 100% capacity. Are all OACs operating at full capacity again? I know you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but just for the record.
No, they're not. No, they're not. And it really is the program's ability and readiness, and that's what guides the reopening. All right.
I'm sure I know the answer to this, but have OACs encountered difficulties in operating at 100% capacity? And is DFTA proactively reaching out to OACs to assist them in any troubles that they're encountering?
Yeah, I can say with confidence that our staff is in regular communication with the providers. And the goal is that we're in this together and to make sure that we address this together. As far as there are a variety of issues that impact the opening, full opening. It could be members' hesitancy and concerns. It could be staffing requirements. It could be just getting the facility that had been operating for 25% for about a year to now 100%. So it's upgrades in the physical plant needs. So it's things of that nature.
Understood. Will DFTA be sending out any guidance to all other programs such as NORCS and transportation confirming capacity restriction and guideline changes or guidance changes, which was done for the OACs?
We do that for the NORCS. We will do that, and for the 9 senior adult daycare centers that we operate. We will not do that for the state, because the state dictates the operation of the other social adult daycare centers.
Mask wearing and social distancing guidelines for staff and participants remain in place, as well as health screening assessments for staff and participants upon entry. Are there plans to include proof of vaccine for that in terms of entry?
At this point, no, because it's 100% occupancy. That was a requirement before when it was 25%.
Okay. A couple of counties upstate required vaccines in senior centers. Did DFTA ever consider this in consultation with DOHMH? It sounds like you did. And why wasn't a vaccine mandate ever implemented at older adult centers, which is different than proof of?
Yeah, I don't know that. I think that that's a consideration and a conversation that we continuously have with DOMH. But now that we have 100% occupancy, I think that supersedes the mandate requirement, because we also have the other health and safety requirements. But we do have a mandate requirement for staff at senior centers, at older adult centers.
A vaccine mandate for staff?
Yes, that was imposed early on when the vaccine mandate was imposed for all human service employees as well as for city employees.
Okay, so now going back to 100% capacity, there's no vaccination only programming. That's correct, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Last month, the average daily participation rate was 15,800, about 60% of pre-pandemic numbers, and well below DFTA's target of 26,324. The FY22 budget included $2 million for marketing and outreach. How much of that has been spent so far?
That would depend on invoicing. I do not have that number for you, but I know that a lot of activities are going on for outreach and education by the local provider. I don't have a number because that is part of the entire program budget.
Okay, we can follow up with you
Yeah.
on that.
We can give you.
And at last month's budget hearing, DFDA stated that it put together a working group to develop best practices for marketing and outreach to get older adults back into the centers. What's the status of this working group, and what's the outreach plan to increase participation at Oaks?
The plan is to put together these members to see what the best practices are. We've created work groups in the past that were very instrumental in informing on new directions. And based on what they come up with, we could either make those mandates or strong suggestions on outreach efforts. But it's still early in its formation.
Okay, so it hasn't started work yet.
No.
Okay. I have a couple of more questions. Bear with me here 1 second. Has DFDA been tracking the demographics of the clients coming into older adult centers and whether or not the demographics have shifted during the pandemic?
What we track is daily average participant. When the older adult center staff input data on demographics of older adults, that's all voluntary. The older adult self-identifies in whichever manner they want. Then that data is keyed in.
Okay, so how can we ensure that seniors in all communities are being provided with the information and support they need to receive services at Oaks again?
We make sure that that older adults know that any older adult in the city of New York can go to an older adult center. That is universal. That is part of everything that we communicate. In addition to that, at the local level, each one of the providers has an engagement strategy, which includes trusted stakeholders and other community partners. And so that is an ongoing effort, which is why in the RFP, we added money so that could become part of a structure rather than that it's uneven across programs. We wanted everyone to engage with their local partners to make sure that more older adults were familiar with the services and would engage in the services. And that is why that particular effort was funded as a category. Before, it was never funded as a category.
Okay, thank you. I have a few more questions, but I wanted to just circle back to something. There was some conflicting information when I asked earlier about the funding for older adult centers and NORCs and the numbers. You said that the 5 were included in the 31, I believe. But then, Michael, you stated that the 5 were in addition to the 31. So can we just get confirmation?
Yeah, the confirmation is that there's 31, and those include the 5. Michael added them. There were 31 total additional, and of that includes the 5.
Okay. All right, I just want to make sure that's the final, because we received different information before the hearing and then 2 different bits during the hearing. So I just want to make sure that's the.
And I will confirm that again with Michael, but we didn't have 36 new sites. We had 35 new sites. 31 new sites. That was always the expansion. And what we did was we took money from those, we reprogrammed some of the money of the entire pot to readdress those 5 communities that needed new, more vibrant participation in the RFP process.
Okay. All right. If I need to come back to that one, then I will. But
yeah, and we'll get back to you on that because Michael and I are still debating that. All right.
All right. Okay, thanks. So, you know, mental health support groups are some of the more in-demand programs for older adults returning to the centers. Does DIFDA support the council's preliminary budget response that includes $8.7 million to expand DIFDA's geriatric mental health program?
Is that a trick question? We will always support any additional supports to expand geriatric mental health as well as other DIFDA services. So yes, you know, as long as we do that, you know, in consultation, there will always be a plan to address the needs, because as you know, and I've always said, the needs way outpace the resources available.
Right. We definitely know that for sure. Councilmember Lee had to run earlier, but she left me with a few questions. So I'll run through her questions and then I'll turn it back over to the other chairs before we get into the public testimonies. So you mentioned that you received applications for the reissued RFP, which are the 5 locations that we've referenced a few times. How many applications exactly did you receive for that RFP?
I don't have that in front of me. I will get you that.
Okay. And I know that the neighborhoods were determined based on, you know, they were underserved, right? But she's curious. Go ahead.
In the initial RFP, when we designated all of the communities, we were looking at particular communities that were underserved. All right, and that with growth, that's why we targeted particular communities.
Okay, so she's curious to know how you determined. Oh, was somebody saying something?
I'm just going to clarify that the 5 are not underserved. They were where we received proposals that were not viable the first go around. So we're reissuing with the hope to get viable proposals this time.
But Michael, the larger question becomes, when we issued the original RFP, we looked at service gaps, we looked at ethnic disparities, or a need for ethnic services. Right. So I was answering the larger question.
Yes, but both answers are helpful. Thank you. And I think just as follow-up, she'd like to know how those neighborhoods were determined. So what were the metrics that were used to identify those underserved neighborhoods? And if funding wasn't an issue, how many additional neighborhoods would potentially be identified? Did you have to narrow it down based on what was available?
Yes, and we were looking at current growth and future growth, and what we were trying to address was at least the most immediate current growth needs that were going unaddressed, where the greatest service gaps occurred.
Okay, so do you know how many more neighborhoods or communities, you know, if funding wasn't an issue, how many more communities would fit those parameters?
We probably have that information somewhere, and more than likely we can give you that. We can give you the table of what we currently have, and then where the growth is experiencing and what we can project will be the needs. We can do that. We will.
Okay,
it'll take us a while to do that, Councilmember Hudson, but we can get that information for you.
Okay, we are a patient bunch, so we'll wait for it.
And did we follow? And I'm sure we followed up with you to give you the tutorial on how we do that, how we go about projecting growth and plotting it across the city, right? That's been a commitment that we have to do that with you and your committee members, the aging committee. So
okay, so we look forward to doing that then.
Let's schedule that so that we can do that sooner than later.
Okay, will do. How much does it cost to fund a senior center?
Given the model budget, The model budget had a threshold of, it's either $350,000 or $400,000. I will get you the precise number unless somebody can give that to me now. And Luella, do you know, Michael, do you know, somewhere in that range? And that is why we did the model budget, because in the past we had centers that were operating with 150,000 budget. And we thought that there was some disparity, and Councilmember Chin at that time really pushed to have this model budget. But if we look at cost of inflation, we're looking at that right now to see how we need to readjust or look at some of the factors that went into the model budgeting creation, right? Just to see if there's any changes in those factors.
Okay. In your testimony,
to say that model budget was done at a point in time, and that was over 2 years ago. That
right.
we should revisit that. All right.
Right. Yeah, that would be appropriate, I think. In your testimony, you mentioned connecting with 255,000 unduplicated older adults since March 2020, plus their caregivers through social engagement calls. How does that 255,000 compare to the overall number of clients across all of DFDA's older adult centers? And what are the challenges and barriers to reaching more if we think about, you know, the 1.7 million older adults we have in New York City?
And that was just based on the wellness calls. If you add to that virtual
the home delivery meal program specifically.
Okay, repeat the question, because I was.
No, I was just saying the 255 that you just mentioned for the wellness calls. The wellness calls were done for the home delivered meal program specifically, right?
No, wellness calls were done for all.
Okay.
Wellness calls were done for all.
Okay, so I guess the question is really 255,000 seems low.
Yes.
So
yes, that's unduplicated count, right?
Right. So what are the challenges or barriers to reaching more folks?
And that was, and what I'm trying to say is that was just one measure, and that was wellness calls. There were other older adults being connected through virtual programming. And so that number would go high. That number was specifically for the wellness calls.
Okay. For the postcards that you distributed that I think you've already collected, you mentioned, what languages were they translated into, and were they translated by the city or by the providers themselves?
Michael?
I'll answer. So the postcards went out with the meals that began, the meal delivery through last week. This week, only this week, we're asking that they return them to their delivery person. Hopefully we'll get a lot, and if not, we'll ask for them next week as well. We sent it to a source to do the translation. Not with the original postcard. The original postcard was sent in English. The survey was sent in English. The surveys are now being translated into the preferred language, and those are going to be mailed out very, very shortly.
Do you know which languages?
The top 10 languages, English, I can get those to you. Yes. Yes.
Top 10
Spanish.
languages in the city, you're saying?
Yes.
No, not the top 10 languages in the city. It's the top 10 languages that older adults in the city speak.
Yes, that were, each person that registered for Get Food had to identify their preferred language. We looked at those and translated the top 10, which closely mimics the same.
So you translated them or providers translated them?
We have an outside vendor that is doing it.
Okay.
That has done it.
Okay. I think it would be helpful to just follow up on that and get the full list of the languages.
Yes.
Yep. And
we're going to return next mailing will be the English and their preferred language, both. And we're also calling them.
Okay. Do you call them in their preferred language?
We have access to Language Line.
Okay. And when you use this third-party vendor, are the providers provided, are the providers included in that process? Do they get to like review a draft at all of the translations?
We haven't asked them to, and by the providers, you mean the vendors that are delivering the meals?
Correct.
They're subcontracts. We can discuss with the 3 vendors.
And for
Okay.
clarification, the staff reviews those to make sure that it is done and communicated, where we have the capacity. I mean, that is not done without some review.
Right, and the vendors did contribute to the English version. They haven't looked at the translated version. They reviewed.
Right.
the
I think we're
English
more
version.
concerned about the translated version than the English version.
Yeah.
Okay. And then of the 2.7 million congregate and grab and go meals that have been served since June 2021, how many of those are unduplicated meals?
That is unduplicated.
So that's,
So,
okay, not together.
right, if you think about 13, 14, 15,000 average per week times the number of weeks over the 9 months, that's how you got to the 2.7. So on average, it's been 15,000 or so.
Okay.
15,200 to be precise.
Right.
Okay, thank you. And then just going back to, you answered the question, about additional money from our budget response, the $8.7 million. So, if we're able to get that, what types of mental health services would you add? How would you expand services? Would you only partner with Article 31 clinics, or would you partner with other types of mental health providers? And if so, which ones? And how would you address staffing for these programs? Would you limit it to just social workers, or would you consider paraprofessionals? And what would the plans be to scale up those mental health services?
The mental health service guidelines are determined by the state. And so we follow the state, which is why we designed a hub and spoke model, which means that we will still have one state, that one geriatric mental health program that meets all of the requirements of the state, but then they can have offshoots and staff that can go to other facilities so that we could expand the reach. So that is why we had the hub and spoke model to expand that reach, because we wouldn't be able to serve, the number of centers that we would like to reach, because they don't have, most of them would not meet the requirements of the state to, provide mental health services. And it's a variety of things. So that's why we've designed that other model that expands our reach and doesn't restrict us to all of the guidelines imposed by the state. Yet the quality of service is never in dispute, because it's the same staff providing them. They're just in different facilities or bringing older adults to their facilities. So it's a different approach.
Okay. Those are all my questions. I'll
in terms of what I also want to remind or to bring up is something that we raised at the last hearing, was that there was discretionary dollars that, as a result of our commitment to fund the ethnic and smaller community-based programs, would then 13 of them were funded under the RFP. There's $5.1 million that those programs are now using, city tax levies, federal and state dollars to run their programs rather than just discretionary. And so we want, to reinforce the commitment of the council to not, to keep those $5.1 million in the aging portfolio so that we can continue expanding services.
Okay. Thank you. I will turn it over to Chairs Mealy and Moya, and then I'll let Crystal come back on for the rest of the.
Thank you, Chair. I only have one question. So far in FY 2022, OACs have an average of 5,541 daily participants in the grab and go meals. We have heard that, just rumors that grab and go meals will end at the end of this year. Will DIPTA consider extending grab and go meals option long-term to allow programs the flexibility to serve nutritionally at-risk seniors as the older adults might prefer?
During this transition period, we are building in the most flexibility, particularly that we have the 100% capacity lifted. So we will put in as many opportunities as possible to expand and to ensure that people get the services that they need. Our commitment is to ensure that older adults can get those services met in the way that they prefer. But that being said, grab and go was an emergency measure. It was put in as part of an emergency plan. And our goal is to bring people back to socialize as much as they can in person. So to the extent that we can do that, that is the goal.
Are you extending possibility of extending the grab and go meals?
It is something that we will monitor carefully with our providers. And if we think that that is an appropriate approach to continue, we would do that, as long as it doesn't become a default and minimize in-person participation. The Older Americans Act is funding these programs because they want in-person congregate activities and meals. So and they built in some emergency flexibility. We can work and see how long that flexibility is allowed for us as a funding source from the overhead agency. But yes, it's something that we will monitor carefully with our participants.
I appreciate it. I'm gonna turn it over to Chair Moya.
Yeah, I'm done with questions, Commissioner. I'll follow up with you on the things that we had discussed earlier today.
Right. And by the way, we got some responses for the Corona RFP, so I thought you would be very interested in that. All right.
Okay.
We're going to turn it over to Crystal Parn, our moderator.
Thank you, Chairs Hudson, Mealy, and Moya. We will now begin public testimony. The first panel of public testimony in order of speaking will be Christian Gonzalez Rivera, followed by Brianna Payton Williams, followed by Farhana Hussain. I'd like to remind everyone that I will be calling on individuals one by one to testify. Each panelist will be given 3 minutes to speak. Please begin your testimony once the sergeant cues you. Council members who have questions for a particular panelist should use the Zoom raise hand function, and I will call on you in the order you raised your hand. After the panelist has completed their testimony, for panelists, once your name is called, a member of our staff will unmute you and the Sergeant at Arms will set the timer, then give you the go-ahead to begin. Please wait for the Sergeant to announce it. You may begin before delivering your testimony. I will now call on Christian Gonzalez Rivera.
Time starts now.
Hi, everybody. My name is Christian Gonzalez Rivera, and I'm the Director of Strategic Policy Initiatives at the Brookdale Center for Healthy Aging. We're a research and policy center at Hunter College that's focused on aging. Importantly, for the members of the council, we serve as a resource to you for scholarship and practical policy advice for making New York a great place to age. Our research work actually includes work on meaningful access to technology and human services, which of course have been mentioned in this hearing so far. So thank you to Chairpersons Hudson, Mealy, and Moya and members of the committees and subcommittees for holding this oversight hearing. So I want to start by acknowledging the fact that many, writers and speakers have shared before, and that is that isolation is harmful to older adults and to New Yorkers of all ages. The effects of isolation are particularly insidious for older adults. So we feel that the decision to reopen older adult centers and allow full capacity were the right decisions. But what I wanted to address my comments is that, now with new leaders such as yourselves taking, the helm of the city, this is a great time to think about the future and to think about some fresh ideas about what older adult clubs could be, not just try to go back to what they were. So I'd like to address my comments to the present moment and the possibilities for the future for these centers. As you know, older adult clubs are a critical resource for 1 in 5 New Yorkers of the age of 60. But social connections don't just happen at older adults clubs. They happen in community. So as the city's dedicated spaces for older adult clubs can be both portals and platforms that allow older New Yorkers to carve out meaningful roles for themselves in their own communities. And to accomplish this, we suggest that the older adult clubs of the future serve 2 main functions. First, it should be a place that facilitates access to the city's abundant resources, many of which are outside of the walls of the older adult clubs. Second, it should be a place that unleashes older New Yorkers' power to use their knowledge, skills, and energy to support their fellow New Yorkers, regardless of age. So I'll go over, what I mean by each one of those. So the more than 250 older adults clubs across the 5 boroughs are asked to be a cafeteria, benefits counselor, mental health counselor, recreation center, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, for New Yorkers ages 60 to 100 and beyond. Why do this when we live in a city with thousands of restaurants, the most cultural and recreational opportunities in the country, and hundreds of colleges and other learning centers? So what I mean by this is that the older adult center of the future would be funded not just by DFTA. Imagine a future where the Department of Parks and Recreation could fund with older adult centers to provide exercise classes, or where HRA provides funding for benefits counselors, or where DOHMH could provide wellness activities. So expanding beyond the usual model to go beyond that. On the other end, sort of to paraphrase, former President JFK, older adult centers should also ask what New Yorkers could do for their city. So imagine a future where older adult centers are not just dependent on DFTA for their lunch money, but could hold a contract with the DOE to hold nutrition classes that are led by older adults for the benefit of younger people. And I know that I'm above time, so I just want to, sort of leave those ideas here, and I'd love to talk further about them offline with anybody who's interested in developing those ideas. But thank you again for the opportunity to testify. And just as I said in the beginning, we remain always available to you as you think about how the city can become a better place to grow older. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I will now turn it to Chair Mealy, who I believe has the question or comment.
I just more have a comment. I would love to talk to you offline that we can shape the city a different way without senior. Please count me in, and I would love to speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now turn it over to Brianna Payton Williams.
Time starts now.
Hello, I'm Brianna Payton Williams, the Communications and Policy Associate at Live On New York. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. Live On New York's members include more than 110 community-based nonprofits, including a number of our members who are testifying today, including JASA, SAGE, and Self-Help, just to name a few. And through our members, they provide core services which allow all New Yorkers to thrive in our community as we age. And as we'll hear from our members, that with our growing aging population, older adult centers were a lifeline during the pandemic, and particularly in response to the increased risk of food insecurity and a rise in social isolation that plagued many older adults. For months, OACs operated at 25% capacity, and that really created a number of administrative challenges for providers. Yet recently, DFTA announced that all older adult centers can lift capacity limits, and Live On New York is appreciative of this new guidance that allows older New Yorkers to return to the centers that they know and love. Nonetheless, we know that there's more work to be done to fully support older New Yorkers back into the new normal. And while with older adult centers, operating at full capacity capacity, the city really has the opportunity to create long-term solutions and make meaningful investments to ensure all New Yorkers can access equitable and community-based services. And recognizing this opportunity, Live On New York applauds City Council for their leadership in calling for additional investments in older adult centers in their response to Mayor Adams' FY22 preliminary budget. And that includes the $8.7 million to expand DFDA's geriatric mental health service, as well as a cost of living adjustment for human service workers, as well as $30 million for recovery meal transitions, just to name a few. But to programmatically support older adult centers into the future, Live On New York recommends that DFDA and the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene should continue to work in partnership with older adult center providers to respond to the future COVID-related challenges, as well as share public health response best practices with centers as needed. Two, in addition, the city should continue to work in partnership with community-based organizations, including older adult centers, which are often sources of trust to marginalized communities, to further promote access to vaccine and vaccine boosters. Three, and just as clear guidance was shared with providers to increase capacity, DFDA should clearly share this information and any relevant best practices with other contracts such as NORCS, transportation, case management, and others. And so it's to our understanding that OAC, capacity restrictions changes do indeed extend to these programs. However, it would be beneficial to have this point clearly documented. And in addition, the city should continue to support new models of services such as virtual programming and the grab and go meals that have proven to be successful into the future. And in particular with the grab and go meals, it has proven successful in ensuring older adults who may not be comfortable congregating due to COVID risk or for in-person reasons or personal reasons, are willing to meet their nutritional needs by eating at an older adult center and have an option to take their meal home, a decision that ensures one's nutritional needs can be met in the environment of one's choosing. More information can be found in my written testimony, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you, Brianna. I'll now turn it over to Councilmember Brewer.
Thank you very much. Two questions. One for Brookdale is, I had mentioned a little bit about the technology idea that you came up with or others. I wanted to know if you could expand on that for 2 minutes. And then for Brianna and the great work at Live New York, where you have been our rock during the pandemic, what is the possibility of trying to do more scratch food in some of your centers as the time goes on? So those are my two questions.
Okay, unmuted. Thank you for the question, Gail. Just quick overview, there are 400,000 New Yorkers over the age of 60 who do not have internet access at home, just to give you an idea of, sort of the scale of the issue. And so we at Brookdale wrote a report called Meaningful Access, in which we try to break down why that is, and so we found that, there are sort of five main reasons why, I guess let's say it the positive way. I mean, it's like sort of 5 indicators of meaningful access to technology. The first are access to devices, which is something that DFDA is making, great strides on. The second is access to a connection. I mean, which of course, it involves affordability as well. But critically, in order for older New Yorkers or older people in particular to have access, you need to go beyond those two. And the first is around education. So education is really thinking about, why is the internet useful to you? I mean, it's like just, the very, very first question before you even ask, how do I use the internet? It's the question, why? So basically from, let's say, I'm 82 years old, I never used the internet until now. Why should I start now? That's the main question. So the education piece. Then there's the training piece, which, we've discussed in this hearing already. I mean, it's like how critical it is to have the actual skills for being able to use the internet. And the last is what Councilmember Brewer talked about, about the idea of ongoing support for how to use the internet. Because basically, it's like, put yourselves in the shoes of somebody who's just learning to use the internet. You've got the skills, okay, I'm getting online, I'm doing it, and then I run into trouble. What happens? What do I do? Do I give up, or who do I turn to for help? So those 3 pieces are critical. And this doesn't just come out of thin air. This comes out of research that I'm happy to talk a little further with you about. So the idea that Councilmember Brewer talked about is the idea of universal 311 tech support. So basically, who do you turn to if you don't have a grandkid, who's waiting by the phone, to help you at any time? You might call 311 and you say, I speak, hablo español, I speak Chinese, I speak English, etc. And you would be transferred to an organization who is trained to support you in your language with whatever your question is. So that would be a service that New York City could offer through 311, which is a number that everybody knows. It's not a new thing. And it would really help a lot of older New Yorkers and others, of course, to get the tech support that they really need in order to be functional online.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you want me to talk about?
No,
Councilmember?
they'll kill me to make you talk too much, Christian. Thank you.
Sorry, what was that? One more time?
No, nothing else. Thank you. That's perfect.
Okay, no problem.
Brianna, about your scratch food.
Sure. So in regards to scratch foods, I will just note that we know with the traditional home delivered meals program that there needs to be an infrastructure in place to ensure that providers can both buy the supplies, buy the food, but also have additional items such as new refrigerators to support the programs. And so even though I wasn't able to talk about some of the budgetary recommendations, we are also calling for 12.7 million in additional funding to meet the home delivered meals program. And so this would address, as well as meeting the new capacity, but also with some of those infrastructure needs, such as new fridge and to support providers with being able to produce the food within their kitchens.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
We will now turn to Farhana Hussein. The next panel after Farhana will be Dr. Cynthia Maurer, followed by Mohini Mishra, followed by Molly Krakowski. And I'll turn it back to Farhana.
Time starts now.
Thank you for providing us this opportunity to speak in today's committee hearing. I am here on behalf of India Home, a nonprofit founded by healthcare professionals dedicated to serving South Asian older adults in New York. Our programs have touched the lives of over 5,000 older adults, almost all of whom are immigrants across Queens and beyond, through programs such as congregate meals, case management, education, civic engagement, arts programs, advocacy, and more. We've witnessed the needs of our seniors increase exponentially during the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, accessing food in particular has been the #1 cited concern for Asian American New Yorkers. Through our home delivered meals and grocery assistance program, we have provided 621 vulnerable seniors with culturally competent halal and vegetarian meals and over 1,200 grocery packages at India Home. However, despite our efforts, we are at capacity and know that there is still a much greater need for culturally competent and nutritious food for all of our seniors. There's also a greater need for more digital competency training and technology access among immigrant older adults. For over a year since the pandemic, we have provided health exercises, education, and creative aging sessions virtually. Though we have shifted into offering in-person programming again, we've seen firsthand at India Home the benefits of virtual programming, such as combating isolation and depression, maintaining cognitive and physical health, and even reducing the effects of chronic health illnesses for some of our seniors. Given this great potential for keeping our seniors connected and engaged, whether they are homebound or not, we want to continue providing our virtual programming post-pandemic. We request that the committee allocate funding for capacity building, equipment, and training that will help sustain these programs. Furthermore, health disparities have heightened, especially in accessing COVID-19 vaccine and related information. The vaccination procedure can be difficult for seniors who lack digital literacy and have language barriers. Many of our seniors do not have access to reliable internet, smartphones, or even an email address to navigate the system. So these are just a few examples of the challenges faced by our seniors and the ways that we as an organization are under-resourced. As such, India Home makes the following recommendations. 1, support grassroots organizations like ours with resources and funding that will help us safely reopen our centers while also parallelly running virtual programs. 2, working directly with immigrant senior serving organizations to guide decision-making regarding senior center provision in a culturally competent manner. 3, prioritize food security in the COVID-19 response for seniors. And 4, provide funding for technology to help newly arrived immigrant seniors who are even more vulnerable to social isolation. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you for your testimony. The next panelist is Dr. Cynthia Maurer.
Time starts now.
Moved here. Okay, great. I was trying to unmute. Sorry about that. Hi, everyone. I'm Cynthia from Visiting Neighbors. I want to represent the group that is basically on the front lines that is not senior center oriented. We provided direct services throughout the pandemic. We were open and active full time. We did not stay home. We were here because seniors, most of our clients are amongst the oldest old, which is 85 plus, and they do not use computers. Direct contact was absolutely needed. So volunteers were incredible. They came up with all kinds of creative ways in the beginning. Remember, we didn't have access to PPE, so we had to create our own in order to see people, and we had to do at a distance. So volunteers were having friendly visits with seniors in hallways, separated, grabbing chairs to do that. One of the things that was really we're noticing now is we've talked about, I've heard some mental health issues brought up as a concern, but one thing is self-esteem issues, like what those specific health concerns are and having a sense of self. This is a real serious issue that we've seen amongst our seniors in terms of this pandemic. One thing that's really we're asking is that, first of all, let me say this before I said all that, we love our New York City Council. You guys have really understood what the needs are of the seniors who are out here in New York City, and you've been so supportive of us, and we ask that you continue. We think of ourselves as Visiting Neighbors as a little engine that could, did, does, and is going to continue to provide services such as friendly visiting. So we're helping with isolation, getting people to and from shopping, getting people taking walks, therapeutic walks. Seniors have started to say, I'm feeling cabin fever. I need to get out. Gail Brewer with her, money coming from the restored funding through last year's Borough President funding. We started a therapeutic walking program, which we are now developing. It is so important that we also help with end of life issues, and life didn't stop either while the pandemic was going on. We still had the issues of talking to seniors about their problems and all of their concerns, everything from emotional mental health issues, getting accurate information, self-esteem, depression, being stimulated, and street safety, need access to food. Volunteers stood online and waited on food pantries in order to get food for seniors. Then we also talked to seniors about going to their doctors, having better communication with their seniors, with their health professionals. We are so grateful for all of the support, and we extended our reach throughout this pandemic. And And again, we ask that you continue to fund programs like Visiting Neighbors. We're going to continue to be out here doing what we do best, all those extras being the friends and the family to seniors who majority have nobody. We have 15 seniors turning 100 this year, and we're going to be celebrating with them because we need to honor this population and with dignity and treat them in a way that lets them know that they matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the next panelist will be Mohini Mishra.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mohini. I'm a Vice President at Senior Communities at Self-Help Community Services. Thank you to all the chairs and the committee members for this opportunity. Self-Help is a mission-driven community-based organization which was founded in 1936 to help refugees fleeing Nazi Germany maintain their independence and dignity as they struggle to forge new lives in America. And now each year we serve 25,000 vulnerable New Yorkers, primarily older adults, through 26 program locations in Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, and Long Island, helping them live with dignity and avoid institutionalization. We are the largest Holocaust survivor program in North America. We have 5 home care programs, home health aid, trainings to serve at-risk population. We have city, state funded case management, NORCs, and older adult centers. Our flagship virtual senior center program, which was established in 2010, combats isolation by connecting 1,200 homebound clients using technology across the country, including 700 right here in New York State, and operates on English, Mandarin, Russian, Korean, and Spanish platforms. The need for support for our Virtual Senior Center program and all efforts to expand digital literacy and access to older adults is more important than ever now. Before the onset of COVID-19, our senior centers were a source of nourishment for our seniors' whole being. It was a place to provide mental, physical, social activities 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. This was a home away from home. When senior centers closed during COVID, we saw an increase in cases of depression and stress due to isolation. In response, our centers provided virtual classes available through computers or tablets. During this period, we served about 30 virtual classes through Senior Center, Zoom, telephone conference. We reached over 25,000 unduplicated members. We are now slowly phasing into becoming up to 50%, but keeping all the mask mandates and making sure that our clients feel safe. We just want to thank the City Council for your generous support to self-help and enabling us to continue our high quality care for Holocaust survivors and most vulnerable older adults. We hope to continue on this important work in partnership with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. The next panelist will be Molly Krakowski. Following Molly will be Kathleen Torres, MJ Akma, followed by Alicia Luau Sai. And I'll turn it over to Molly Krakowski.
Time starts now.
Thank you. Good morning. Good afternoon. I'm Molly Krakowski. I'm Senior Director of Government Affairs at JASA. I want to thank council members Hudson, Neely, and Moya for chairing today's important hearing and for the opportunity to share our experiences as a provider of 18 older adult centers and as we enter this latest phase of recovery. The pandemic's impact on older New Yorkers cannot be underestimated. And as you're well aware, virtually all in-person programming and congregate social opportunities came to an end overnight, and providers needed to pivot and quickly transform our services and delivery models. Older adults who were previously very active in DFTA-funded congregate settings, such as older adult centers and NORC programs, were no longer able to gather in crowds for their own safety. And all programming went remote, with exercise and wellness classes, arts and lectures moving to Zoom platforms. While many older adults quickly shifted to the new remote option, for many others, the learning curve was great and the digital divide was and continues to be very apparent. New York City is thankfully in a very different place than we were in March 2020. With increased access to testing and vaccinations, the city began to reopen and provide opportunities for people to return to a semblance of normalcy, gathering with friends, enjoying a more active and engaged lifestyle. And although this was not a complete return to pre-pandemic times, there is a marked change in the attitude and comfort levels. Restaurants, cultural arts, schools, libraries, sports and entertainment were all reopened, and JASA amplified and the educational messaging that's coming from DFTA, DOH, and the CDC, encouraging and providing on-site opportunities for older adults to receive the vaccine and subsequent booster shots. Vaccination rates are among the 60+ population remain relatively high compared to other populations within the city. And as the city reopened congregate programming in June 2021, participation initially capped at 25% with masking. The programming is now hybrid, with some classes in person and others offered remotely. Other older adult members are welcome to participate in person regardless of vaccination status. And while this is currently in line with New York City mandates, and at the time it was in contrast to the requirement of vaccines at restaurants, entertainment venues, and in other workplaces. As of March 21st, DFTA has expanded the capacity of congregate programming to 100%, and JASA welcomes the opportunity to serve more members. We're eager to return to the pre-pandemic attendance rates. However, there are concerns that we may face future outbreaks of the virus, and it's critical that we remain vigilant in our efforts to mitigate the impact of COVID on the older adult community. JASA will continue to work closely with DFTA and educate members on safety protocols and the availability of vaccines and boosters. Hybrid programming has emerged as a meaningful service modality during the pandemic for frail and isolated older adults. JASA will continue to offer a robust remote programming schedule for older adults and advocates for designated funding to support enhancing remote programming.
Time expired.
Including targeted technical skill training for older adults to improve access and participation. An older adult's ability to access remote programming can be critical to avoid the negative consequences associated with social isolation in the event of future COVID outbreaks. Thank you for the opportunity to provide today's testimony, and thank you for being a partner on the City Council and DIFTA. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. The next panelist is Kathleen Torres.
Time starts now. Kathleen, we can't hear you. No.
No, we can't hear you. Yeah, you're
No.
unmuted, but we can't hear you. Maybe you could try headphones and we can come back to you. All right, we're going to move on to MJ Akma.
Time starts now.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is MJ Okma with SAGE, the country's first and largest organization dedicated to improving the lives of LGBTQ+ elders. SAGE provides social services through a network of 6 older adult centers across the city, including being the on-site service provider in New York's first LGBTQ+ welcoming elder housing developments in Brooklyn and the Bronx. Through the ongoing pandemic, SAGE serves as a lifeline for LGBTQ+ elders who depend on us for assistance with essentials like food and access to medical support. While SAGE has resumed in-person services, the ongoing pandemic response has created positive shifts in how we're able to provide our program and services, changes that have greatly expanded our impact. We strongly recommend that the city codify some of these shifts in service delivery and not simply consider reverting back to pre-COVID-19 model as the end goal. Specifically, virtual programming and grab-and-go meals have been critical for older people in our city. These initiatives must continue even as in-person programming and congregate meals restart. In addition to those who are hesitant to return to in-person services during COVID, SAGE has experienced an increase in demand for virtual services among full-time working and disabled elders who are unable to easily travel to our centers. There has also been an increase in elders who are not out and who are still questioning their sexual orientation and gender identity. Similarly, grab-and-go meals expanded access to nutrition services and remain necessary for LGBTQ+ elders who are concerned about dining indoors, as well as those who are food insecure on the weekends when centers are closed. It is also a powerful tool to reach and build relationships with community members who are not yet fully involved with our other programs. SAGE strongly supports the integration of grab-and-go meals into future contracts to provide more equitable support to food insecure older New Yorkers. We also want to express our support for DIFTA's call for more intergenerational programming at older adult centers, as creating ties across generations is one of SAGE's driving principles, and it is deeply necessary in light of the impacts of COVID. However, this work is currently disincentivized through DIFTA contracts. Oaks cannot track intergenerational participants in STARS and must maintain an entirely separate database. Additionally, young participants cannot be counted towards contract deliverables. SAGE supports the development of a better system to better incentivize vital intergenerational work. I also want to touch on the fact that Oaks continue to play a vital role in promoting the vaccine. We know that the city is gathering data on vaccination rates among participants through cross-referencing STARS with data from the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Sharing this information on the current vaccination rates of participants would help SAGE and other aging providers better target vaccine hesitancy in our communities. Thank you so much, Chair Hudson, Mealy, and Moya, and all the staff who put together this important oversight hearing for providing me with this opportunity to testify. More details can be found in my written testimony. We look forward to working with you all to ensure that we're meeting the needs of LGBTQ+ elders who have been disproportionately impacted by the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you. I'll now turn it over to Chair Mealy.
Yes, you said they are tracking and have a database.
Yep.
Who is doing that? I would love to know.
My understanding, based on our programs team, is that DIFTA has been kind of cross-referencing the data that providers put in STARS, the Senior Tracking Analysis and Reporting System, with the data from the Department of Mental Health and Hygiene about vaccination rates. So if they could share with providers what for privacy concerns, we don't need to exactly know which participant is and isn't, but just an overall percentage. Like if we knew that 80% of our community members were vaccinated, that would change our strategy versus if like 20% of our participants were vaccinated. It would just help, us better serve our community.
Thank you. And that's one thing I think I'm in talk with our city council. How can we track and know what percentage of people our seniors have been vaccinated that's going back to 100% capacity. We don't want the spread to go out there again. So how can we as a government agency not know the percentage of people being vaccinated and going into the centers and maybe affecting others or maybe not, but we do need that database. We need research, tracking to make sure that happens. If you have a database, I would love to talk to you about it, that I can see how some of the seniors in every area is being tracked with vaccinated and unvaccinated, going back into full capacity of our OACs. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moderator.
Thank you. We'll now try to return to Kathleen Torres and see if her audio issues are resolved.
Time starts now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Wonderful. My name is Kathleen Torres, and I'm the Executive Director of RAIN Inc., Regional Aid for Interim Needs. On behalf of RAIN, I would like to thank Chair and committee members for the opportunity to testify today. RAIN was established in 1964 and has grown to be one of the largest aging services providers in the Bronx that has extensive experience in addressing the social determinants of health within low-income, underserved communities of color. RAIN is a culturally diverse organization across all levels of leadership and staffing. In March of 2020, our city went into a full lockdown. Our most vulnerable and at-risk older adult population were faced with pandemic-related stressors such as confinement, illness, grief, loss, social isolation. Older adults who were once independent and actively engaged in their community could no longer visit their OAC safe haven and home away from home. Older adult centers offer wellness programs, recreational and educational programs, nutrition education, congregate meals, exercise classes, health promotion, and access to food pantry. These activities improve the quality of life and impact healthy aging by reducing isolation and fostering engagement and creativity that impacts cognitive and overall health. We also offer evidence-based workshops on a broad range of topics to empower individuals with the knowledge to facilitate and impact healthy practices and behaviors. Historically, older adult centers have been at the forefront of combating social isolation and food insecurity. And throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, older adult centers functioned as a lifeline to preserve the well-being of older adults through daily wellness calls and virtual programming. RAIN staff continued to work on-site, enrolling older adults in the Get Food NYC program for meals and mitigating any delivery issues. And some of our older adult centers also functioned as COVID-19 testing locations and pop-up vaccinations. Our home-delivered meals programs continue to provide 10,000 nutritious meals a week to homebound older adults who are unable to prepare meals because of incapacity due to accident, illness, physical or mental frailty. These meals facilitate healthy aging by positively impacting nutritional health. Case management program also authorizes in-home support services to homebound older adults. Our transportation services provide individual transportation for older adults with mobility limitations or inability to drive or use public transportation. This positively impacts older adult aging in place by facilitating the ability to regularly attend doctor appointments, access to medical care, and participate in community programs such as older adult centers. On-site case assistance services, including assistance with applications for benefits and entitlements and supportive assistance, help older adults cope with the issues and the needs of daily living. Through this vast range of programs and services offered at our older adult centers, older adults remain integrated and supported within the community. Older adult centers played a critical role as trusted and reliable partners in responding to the needs of the community during the pandemic. Our current budgets remain at the same level, despite the food and supply chain price increase that show no signs of dropping to pre-pandemic levels. It is also important to protect seniors from abuse and exploitations. Just this week, an older adult was caught in the crossfire and suffered a fatal gunshot wound. New York crime rate and elderly hate crimes have skyrocketed. I beg and plead to all committee members in attendance that as we move into the recovery phases of this pandemic, it is especially important to recognize the need for increased security and safety measures, trauma-focused geriatric mental health services to address the adverse psychological effects of the pandemic and community violence, and look to increase funding to meet the growing needs of the aging population. I would like to acknowledge and thank the Department for the Aging, Commissioner Cortez Vasquez for her vision for an age-inclusive city, all advocates and older adult center staff, Chair Member Hudson, Mealy, and Moya, and also a council member and additional council members in attendance. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now turn it over to Chair Mealy.
I thank you for your resilience. I'm really thinking about, you said transportation. Do they have to put their Medicaid or give you their Medicaid, Medicare in order to get the transportation to and from medical appointments?
Well, there's a transportation program, and there's also transportation that's provided within the older adult centers. So we have that services. So there's two different services who are not Medicaid eligible. Yeah.
Is not Medicaid eligible.
For transportation, for our transportation program, the standalone.
Oh,
but
okay.
at the centers, we have the vehicles at the centers that provide that service to and from as well.
Okay, I'm looking forward to talking to you regards to that. And I hope I can speak with Chair Moyer for the isolation part in regards to our seniors. That is a major factor going on right now. And they scared to go to and fro. So we need to have that security package.
Exactly.
Not just from the police, but from DFTA coming down. So if we have to do that ourselves and create a plan for safety for our seniors, let them know, let's do the buddy system. If you don't get home within a certain time, who are you gonna call? If someone strange is standing by your door, what you gonna do? So I'm looking forward. I'm gonna talk to you again.
Oh yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, chairs, I'm finished.
Thank you, Chair Mealy. The next panelist is Alicia Luo-Sai.
Time starts now.
I want to thank Chair Hudson and the council members of the Aging Committee for holding this hearing and giving the Asian American Federation the opportunity to testify on the needs of our senior community. I'm Lisha Lukai, Advocacy Coordinator at AAF, where we proudly represent the collective voice of more than 70 member nonprofits serving 1.5 million Asian New Yorkers. As the members of our seniors working group, the first and only Asian senior-focused advocacy coalition in New York can attest to, the dual crisis of COVID and anti-Asian violence are fundamentally changing the behaviors of clients as they seek out senior services. Many seniors are ready to get back to in-person services, requiring efforts on the part of our senior service providers, adequate staffing for in-person services, and increased operational requirements around food services and COVID safety, while maintaining remote service provisions. Senior centers are our seniors' second home. Our CBOs provide linguistically, culturally, and financially accessible resources that Asian seniors can actually take advantage of. Culturally competent meal programs have become our seniors' lifeline because they give them an opportunity to pick up food or eat together, as well as participate in social activities, receive assistance, applying for services, and access health and mental health care. But our CBOs are overworked, understaffed, and underfunded. CBO staff members are the ones helping seniors apply for social services when government offices themselves do not speak their language. All this physical, emotional, and financial toll throughout the pandemic has led to more burnout among staff who are stretched to their limits with too much work and not enough support. In our seniors working group, CBO staff members say that are most vulnerable where they are with culturally competent, effective senior services require systemic change. This includes city prioritizing cultural competency and language access in contracting processes.
It also means focusing more funding on smaller contracts so the organizations providing care to our most marginalized communities have access to funds they can spend down at their size. For all the work our senior service agencies are doing, from fiscal year 2002 to 2014, the Asian American community received a mere 1.4% of the total dollar value of New York City social service contracts, a reflection of a broader long-term trend. Our CBOs already have Asian seniors trust through culturally competent programming, and they consistently lead by example in provision of direct services, including meal programs, safety reporting programs, and mental health support. But this work depends on the support of our elected officials. We recommended the city increase funding to Asian-led, Asian-serving senior service providers and expand this funding to include time and expenses spent on case management, digital literacy devices, and training. Number 2, increase funding for the AAPI Community Support Initiative in order to sustain and expand direct services that are seeing increased demand, as well as fund critical anti-violence programming in our Hope Against Hate campaign. Number 3, expand funding to include culturally competent, in-language, and senior-focused, non-traditional mental health service models. Number 4, fund a network of linguistically and culturally competent food service programs that provide alternative food benefits to compensate for their loss of access to traditional government assistance programs. Asian-led, Asian-serving CBOs have been Asian seniors' primary support since the day one of pandemic, and long before that too. We at the Asian American Federation thank you for allowing us to testify and look forward to working with all of you to make sure our senior communities get the support that they deserve.
Thank you for your testimony, and sorry for bungling your last name. So at this time, if your hand has not, if your name has not been called and you still wish to testify, please raise your hand using the Zoom raise hand function. Right, seeing no hands raised, Chairs Hudson, Mealy, and Moya, we have concluded public testimony for this hearing, and I will turn it back to you for closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Crystal. And thank you to everyone who has testified today, both from the administration and the public. We do, listen intently and take heed to the recommendations and suggestions that you all make. So thank you again. And we look forward to seeing you at the next hearing. Chair Mealy.
Thank you, Chair Hudson. I'm looking forward to working with you. I like to pull up my sleeves, and I know I have to speak with you that we can get a comprehensive plan. Thank you to the administration for making sure we are on point. Thank you, Ms. Hudson. I see a couple other people have left, but all the advocates, thank you. That is our most vulnerable people out here right now. So the hate crimes have to stop, and we are their defenders. So we're going to be those superheroes. So thank you. I like it. Thank you. Over to Councilmember Moya, Chair Moya.
Thank you so much. Again, just to reiterate, thank you to both of my co-chairs for such an important hearing that we have on our most vulnerable population, which is our seniors, and in particular to our immigrant community who suffered through this pandemic. It was a very difficult time for a lot of our seniors, and you were all there on the front line doing great work to ensure that our seniors were cared for. I want to thank the administration for being here as well in giving their testimony. I'm looking forward to the follow-up that we have to do on some of the questions that we have here. But more importantly, I just want to thank the entire staff here at the council, all the committee staff that really worked very diligently and hard in making sure that we have a very seamless hearing come through. So thank you to the staff for everything that they do. And I look forward to seeing everyone in the near future. Thank you. And
thank you, Commissioner. She's still here. She didn't disappear.
Yeah.
She stayed and listened to all of our questions and all the answers. Thank you, Commissioner Vasquez-Cortez.
Great. And with that, this concludes our hearing for today. Thank you very much, everyone. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.